I put that Arab perspective to Rojava's most powerful woman, Fawzia Youssef, a leader of the ruling party, the PYD. Maybe you tried to impose a system on Arab populations that they were not ready for.
The sociology of every place is different from other locations. To impose any system, or we can't say imposing the system, to explain this system, we needed a longer period. Also, I think what happened in the Arab majority areas, it's not only the people who choose to be against the administration. It's basically a very well-established game, a special war that's been prepared by some actors and posed on the people over there.
That's enigmatic. Berivan Omer, the co-mayor of Kamishlo, is more direct.
There's a lot of people who want to make this crisis because they're Islamic. They think women should stay at home, women shouldn't work.
She's talking, among others, about the president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara. Under his nom de guerre, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, he fought with al-Qaeda and led other jihadi groups. Now he's trimmed his beard, wears sharp suits, and has been embraced by President Donald Trump.
Young, attractive guy, tough guy, strong pass, very strong pass fighter.
Al-Shara's government is still negotiating with Rojava's leaders about what exactly integration into the Syrian state will mean. Diplomats from America, formerly the Kurds' big backer, have tried to exact some concessions for them. But Kurdish expert Zeynep Kaya of Sheffield University in the UK says Rojava's unique system is over.
They've lost all their territory. Their administration has been dismantled.
The idea of a man and a woman in charge of everything is gone.
In their internal practice, I think they will continue that. But officially, there will be one person. This is my prediction.
And usually that official legal person will be a man.
We'll see. But Al-Shara government is very patriarchal. I don't think they would like to have a woman in power. I think they would prefer a man.
There's only one woman in the current Syrian interim government. As for the new Syrian army, the Kurds have been promised 4 brigades of their own within it. But does their leader Fawzia Youssef think there will still be all-women units?
There is no crystal clear decision in this regard. They still don't give any positive signs.
That, in a way, is a red line for you, the continuation of those units.
Yes, it's a red line for us because the YPJ, it's the only guarantee to protect the Kurdish women as we're still in a critical times.
We'll fight rather than disband, some women commanders say. But if it came to that, the odds now would be against them. What will survive, then, of Rojava's women's revolution? Academic Zeynep Kaya.
That project has ended now. But as an idea, it's not going to end. The fact that they planted seeds gives a lot of hope for people going forward that, something like that might happen again in the future.
Singer Mizgin Tahir certainly is hopeful.
I do believe that after the freedom that the women in Rojava have practiced, they would accept to go back to be slaves for men, or they will be covered up and just be housewives. I think the women will gonna fight and will keep their freedom.
And Berivan Omer, who overcame family opposition to run a major city in her early 30s, she certainly isn't planning to give up work and just get married.
Sometimes we think when women found their way, they can go back. It's impossible to go back.
Assignment was presented and produced by me, Tim Hewell.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Right now in Winnipeg, well, it is minus 14 at the airport. Ice crystals being reported there. We're expecting a high of minus 4 today. Chance of light snow. We're going to have more on your forecast coming up. But today here, during the first hour of our show, the cost of measles is more than just an impact to our healthcare dollars. A study out of the U.S. found that it also results in lost productivity and lost wages. So what are we seeing here in Manitoba as cases continue to rise? We're going to hear from an economic expert coming up here on the show. Right now, coming up to 5:58, and Heather Wells joins us now with the very latest in our local news. Hi, Heather.
Good morning. Well, a Manitoba First Nations leader is pushing the province to update its training regulations for security guards. This, of course, comes after a man was charged with using brass knuckles while subduing an alleged shoplifter in Winnipeg. Eric Robinson with the Indigenous Peoples Alliance says First Nations are regularly profiled by security guards. So we're going to hear more from him. As well, a 14-year-old hockey phenom playing for the under-15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings is turning heads in the hockey world. Cale Nickel finished with the highest points per game in Winnipeg's AAA league. And in fact, he broke Winnipeg Jet Jonathan Tave's record set 20 years ago. We're going to hear from his parents coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
That is just absolutely amazing.
It really is. But you know what? They're so low-key about it. The parents and even Cale himself really playing it down.
Wow, good for him. Okay, can't wait to hear more about that. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. So as I mentioned today here in Winnipeg, we're looking to get up to minus 4. 60% chance of some light snow and risk of freezing drizzle. Right now, it is minus 14 ice crystals at the airport in Winnipeg. Brandon, light snow minus 16. Stay with us. World Report is coming up next.
On cue.
I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. Toronto's Ashton James has been on a steady rise with roles in Law & Order Toronto and Netflix's The Madness. Now he leads the remake of the hockey classic Youngblood.
I worked my whole life for this.
He's here to talk about learning to skate for it and how his grandmother inspired him to become an actor.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Today's events, or recent events, point to that. So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is not ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacked Canada or its allies. It follows news that Turkey, a NATO ally Canada is treaty-bound to defend, shot down an incoming missile. Carney says there is a clear distinction between the current U.S. mission and what happens if the conflict spirals.
We're not party to those actions, but we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister says it is not the time for a ceasefire. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, meanwhile, says the alliance is not currently considering its all-for-one collective defense pact, even after a missile was intercepted heading for Turkey. Speaking in Brussels this morning, Rutte said that NATO remains vigilant, but it is not directly involved in the war between the U.S. and Iran.
Nobody's talking about Article 5, and the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant. We support the president in taking out that capability. But of course, there are always downsides in the sense that you have to be sure that you defend every inch of NATO territory, as we are doing.
But Rutte added that while NATO itself isn't a combatant, European allies are providing, quote, key enabling support to allow the United States to project its power into the Middle East. On the ground, meanwhile, the fighting remains a direct showdown between Israel, Iran, and the United States. The CBC's senior correspondent, David Common, has been tracking the escalation from Tel Aviv. David, we are seeing another heavy exchange of fire. What's the latest this morning?
No question that on day 6 of this war, the missiles and drones continue to be fired by essentially all sides here, Iran, Israel, and the United States. Here in Israel, in the overnight hours, we saw a large volley of missiles being intercepted. In fact, just above our position, we saw Israeli interceptors exploding in the air as they took out incoming fire from Iran. Meanwhile, in Iran, the United Nations Refugee Agency says at least 100,000 people have left the capital, Tehran, just in the first 2 days, trying to get to safety. That number likely quite a bit higher now, given the ongoing bombing campaign by both Israel and the United States. We are also hearing that Iranian drones hit Azerbaijan. Not clear whether that country was the intended target or why it would be, but it means another country has been connected to this war. Now, more than a dozen nations involved in this Middle East conflict in some way.
David, beyond the strikes on Iran, Israel pushing further into Lebanon against Hezbollah. How's that front evolving?
This is the second front for Israel. The Americans not involved there, but no question the Israeli Air Force is pounding positions not just in southern Lebanon, but in Beirut as well. We are told 3 people have been killed, 6 others injured after 2 strikes near the capital. Israel has already done a limited ground incursion into South Lebanon, but there are signs with reservists being called up and a greater planning that something bigger might be coming in terms of a ground invasion. Lebanon says 58,000 people have fled their homes and are sheltering where they can find space. Israel has said it's hitting command centers belonging to Hezbollah. Lebanese state media also saying an Israeli drone strike hit an apartment in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, and that killed a senior Hamas official.
CBC's David Comonforce in Tel Aviv. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
British maritime authorities say a tanker off the coast of Kuwait has been hit. There are reports of a huge explosion and oil in the water. It comes as Iran claims passage through the strategic Strait of Hormuz is now under its control, creating a stranglehold on 20% of the world's oil supply. And as Anis Hadari reports, the crisis is creating a potential opportunity for Canada's energy sector.
There's certainly a sense that we've missed the last boat.
Heather Exner-Pirro believes Canada hasn't expanded its capacity to export oil and gas fast enough in the past, but there's still long-term demand for alternatives to the Middle East. She's with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute just outside Calgary.
If you're in Asia in particular, you would say, wow, I really hope that other provider starts providing more, starts producing more, so that we can have a bit more redundancy, a bit more diversity.
Whether that other provider is Canada or not isn't guaranteed, but she says she expects movement.
So I do feel as though there will be an effort to make sure that the oil and the LNG can start to flow, because no one wants to see a $90 or $100 barrel. That would create a shock.
Though Canada can't make up for everything that can't exit the Persian Gulf.
You're not going to totally replace that.
Tristan Goodman heads up the Explorers and Producers Association of Canada. He says his industry can export more, but there's still a capacity limit.
You probably do need additional egress, which is really talking about pipe. There's a bit of opportunity in rail, but not much. It's quite expensive.
Blocking the Strait of Hormuz may be a new problem, highlighting an old concern in Canada, with an industry saying even when customers want or need to buy, it's running out of capacity to sell to them. Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
China is cutting its annual economic growth target to a level not seen in decades. Beijing is now aiming for expansion between 4.5% and 5% as it faces low domestic consumption and global uncertainty. The CBC's Lisa Xing has more from Beijing.
In the capital's legislative building, the Great Hall of the People, thousands of delegates from all over the country are gathered for the 2 sessions, or Lianghui, the meeting of the country's top advisory and legislative bodies. These delegates aren't just politicians, basketball legend Yao Ming among them for several years now, and business leaders like CEO of tech giant Xiaomi, Lei Jun. In the past, even actor Jackie Chan was among them. The focal point, Chinese Premier Li Qiang tabling the key government work report, targeting a moderate 4.5 to 5% GDP growth this year, but saying the world's second largest economy will strive for higher, a nod to China's stagnant consumption. Tackling that is a key priority, he says. Alex Zhou is a consultant with China Macro Group in Shanghai.
The principle is to help people get rid of the social security burden, so you have more space to spend that.
The meeting will also cement China's policy priorities over the next 5 years, with continued focus on tech and AI advancement and self-reliance. Nick Chan is one of the delegates.
A lot of cooperation, a lot of good ideas coming out. Good news for China is good news for the world.
The two sessions are happening as China weathers U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war and as President Xi Jinping welcomes a parade of leaders to the capital, including Trump himself, later this month. Lisa Sheng, CBC News, Beijing.
People in Nepal are voting in an election that could mark a new chapter for the Himalayan nation. This is the first vote since last September's youth-led uprising toppled the previous regime. Dozens were killed in the 2 days of protests against government corruption and economic stagnation. CBC's South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji has more from Kathmandu.
An election volunteer rips off the paper ballot and explains the options to an elderly woman in the capital, Kathmandu. There's a steady stream of voters for an election that could reshape Nepal's politics. The first vote since a Gen Z revolution toppled the previous government. The overwhelming anger over corruption, nepotism, and a weak economy forcing a regime change.
There was so much violence going
Sisters Hanisha and Sahina Shrestha are both voting for the first time.
I am excited but nervous at the same time because I don't know what the result's gonna be. I hope for the change, a good change. I also pray for justice,
Justice for the more than 70 people killed during the protests last fall. The youth vote is key, with nearly half of the country's population younger than 24. But even though they fought for change, Nepal's younger voters aren't certain they'll get it. The country's old guard is very present in this election. The ousted Prime Minister, 74-year-old KP Sharma Oli, running again. His challenger, former rapper and Kathmandu Mayor Balan Shah, the candidate that most young voters see as the one who will bring change to Nepal, says 20-year-old Sirjana Gaide.
He's a modern person and he understands how we want the world to see Nepal.
For Madan Karki, who was shot and injured during the uprising, there's anger. We were protesting for our country, but they shot us like terrorists, he says. I'm not so optimistic that change will come, Karki says. Too many people in Nepal vote according to family tradition for the same old parties, but he's still hoping for the best. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Kathmandu.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on the first hour of our show, the war in the Middle East has put pressure on gas prices. Our personal finance columnist, Rubina Ahmed Haq, has more on what to expect as the conflict continues. And we're going to continue with the conflict in the Middle East. Canada is being warned about cyber attacks from Iran, including those that target critical infrastructure. We'll talk to a technology analyst about how serious the threat is and what hackers might target. That's coming up after 6:30. But first up here on the show, the cost of measles is more than just an impact to our healthcare dollars. A study out of the U.S. found that it also results in lost productivity and lost wages. We're going to hear from a local economic expert coming right up. But at 6:11 here now with your CBC local news headlines is Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the province has launched public consultations to learn more about how you feel about artificial intelligence. It wants to know about the risks of AI, like identity theft, deep fakes, and the misuse of personal data. Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says consultations are a good thing, adding all governments in all countries should be acting on this. And a security guard trainer in northern Manitoba wants the province to revisit its temporary licensing exemption. It allows adults to be employed as security guards for up to 6 months while they wait to be trained and pass the province's exam. But Peter De Beer says it can be a public safety risk. We'll hear more. And that's coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thanks.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. Let's say good morning to our crew here on Information Radio. Darren Morash is producing our feed on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. Sarah Sanders standing by, waiting for your calls on that morning commute. And Abby Adeyemi keeping an eye on that forecast. Well, good morning to you, Abby.
Good morning, Marjorie. We're waking up to cloudy conditions, and it's more like an unsettled Thursday. It still continues. The conditions we've been seeing for like the past week or so. While there are no official warnings in place, the province is still, split between this mix of light snow and freezing drizzle to the southern part, while there's a deep and biting freeze in the northern part of the province this morning. For Winnipeg, we're looking at temperatures around -13, -14, ice crystals in the air. We're looking at a high of more like a seasonal high of -4 for today. Although it's going to be under cloudy conditions, we have that 60% chance of light snow mixed with freezing drizzle for the city. That should be beginning near the noon period, and we'll see morning temperatures stay around -12 before we get to that high of -4 later. Across the southern region, similar temperatures we're seeing -13s to -17s across the region. The Pembina Valley region to the Westman region, looking at cloudy conditions, highs would stay around -6 to -9. The main concern would be more like if we get this freezing drizzle and light snow moving through the Parkland region and the Westman region, you could be seeing the highways, the surface might be a bit slick and slippery, so you need to take it easy if you're driving. While up north, we're still seeing cold temperatures, -20s to -28, and even without no warnings, we're seeing wind chills in the values of -48 in Tuduli Lake this morning and -40 around the Churchill region. So it's still dangerous, and it means there's a risk of frostbite. So overall, grey down south and cold up north. Winnipeg -14 with ice crystals.
If you could just see my face, I know that Abby was giving the weather there, but when I heard -40 wind chill in Churchill, I was just like, oof.
No warnings, but it's still brutally cold as you travel north.
Okay, be safe out there. Let's check in now with Sarah Sanders and a look at that morning commute. Good morning, Sierra.
Good morning, Marjorie. No calls on the commuter line so far as everyone starts to wake up on this Thursday morning. That's been kind of been the trend on the commuter line this week as I've been directing and sitting in the director's chair. Not much going on that commuter line. Maybe some people taking an early spring break. I don't know. But the commute has been pretty smooth for folks so far this week. But if that is not the case and there is something that is getting in your way, whether you are here in the city or out on the highways, which as we heard might get a little bit slick here, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Quarter after 6 now. The cost of measles goes beyond healthcare. That's according to a study out of the University of Utah. One of the key findings found a 2025 outbreak of 1,500 measles cases in the U.S. could cost the country $90 million for just 1 year. Some of that is from indirect costs like lost wages, lost productivity, lost spending. Concerns have been raised about the number of measles cases here in Manitoba. There have been 215 confirmed cases reported in the province so far in 2026. For comparison, there have been 319 confirmed cases reported for all of 2025. So, could this have an economic impact in Manitoba? Matt Scobrook is with Leverage Point Consulting and a regular business columnist with our French counterparts in Radio Canada. He spoke to CBC's Julie Buckingham about what the number of measles cases in Manitoba can tell us.
It's hard to put numbers on something that's health related because, of course, we should be thinking of it in health terms, but the dollar figures are so important when it comes to something like this because public health has a cost, and that cost has to be borne by the government, who we know in Manitoba is in a deficit position, has to make those hard choices. So looking at that University of Utah study, seeing that 1,500 cases cost about $90 million US. Now, of course, we don't know what the figures are in Manitoba, but we've had about a third that number of cases in our province in the past 6 months alone, and that number continues to rise. And so, doing some napkin math, that could be about $30 million US dollars, give or take. I mean, we're talking about a significant portion of money, and about 10% of that is on medical costs for serious cases. About 29% of the costs, according to that study, are for lost productivity. So people who need to stay home, quarantine, deal with sick family members, or just simply not want to go out into the world and risk exposure. That is having an economic impact here at home in Manitoba.
So ultimately, how could that be felt in parts of Manitoba? Because we know many of the cases are sort of centralized in one area. So does it really make a difference on the overall picture for Manitoba?
I think that it was more regional at the time, but now we're seeing larger and larger exposure events. So, for example, the Ag Days exposure event in Brandon or a recent Winnipeg Jets game, we know that there was exposure risk at those places. Now, with it becoming more general, people who might be at risk of measles, people who are immunocompromised, or people like myself with small children who are not yet able to receive the vaccine, we have to collectively make hard choices in order to keep our loved ones safe or ourselves safe. We might not be able to go out and participate, and not just at events. We're talking about going to the workplace, going to meetings, or just generally feeling comfortable leaving our homes. All of those things, when we choose not to do that, and depending on our job, but does have a significant impact. But more importantly, thinking about children, thinking about schools, daycares. If there's a quarantine event, you're talking about not only all of the students or children in that space who need to stay home for a number of days or even weeks. We're talking about all their parents as well who have to take themselves out of the workforce for a significant period of time.
So when I'm listening to you say this, it's almost like you drop the pebble in the pond and then watch those ripples go out. The pebble is the case, and then it grows exponentially by the impact that it could have.
That's exactly right. And what the University of Utah, in that study, they showed that the majority of the cost of a measles or any kind of pandemic outbreak is because of that public health cost, so the contact tracing. But we think about it, what that contact tracing means, that you are having to notify, you were in this place, that there was a risk of exposure. Now you need to be careful. You need to track your symptoms and make sure that you're not at the risk of exposing someone else. Day to day, what that means is stay home and don't put any others at risk. When we do that, we aren't able to go to school. We aren't able to go to daycare. We aren't able to go to work. And so that is where we're talking about lost productivity. Some of us can work at home. Some of us can't.
But then the lost productivity. So, for example, if I come to CBC every day and I maybe walk across the street to the little restaurant and I spend $15 on my lunch, and then on my break, I go down a little further and buy a coffee. So there's some of the other fallout of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And anytime that we are not physically in our communities, spending those small dollars, whether it's a coffee, a lunch, or something broader, we are talking about dollars that are not going into our small businesses and the rest of the broader economy. Now, of course, this is something that we all need to make decisions about, but the decisions that to reach herd immunity, we're talking about vaccinations, and those vaccinations have a positive economic impact as well. So a recent study as well by Johns Hopkins University said that there's for every dollar spent on vaccinations, there's $11 saved in the health system. So the economy as well, on investing in this type of vaccination policy, has a positive economic impact because we're deferring or reducing the downstream medical risks. So there is a lot of value in making the choice to get vaccinated, because down the economic line, it does produce significant savings.
And perhaps that maybe removes the emotion from it, right? We know it's a controversial topic, but at least if you can talk on the money front, it doesn't have that emotion attached to it.
I think some people will, the economic argument does have an appeal. I mean, every time, according to the University of Utah study, every time that there's a measles case, it costs about $60,000 per case. And that's not just medical expenses, that's towards the broader community. And when the government has to pay those costs, those are dollars that can't be spent in other places.
Which industries could be hurt the most and where?
There's daycares and schools are at the highest degree of risk because there are just young people who have not yet had the chance to get vaccinated, as well as people who are immunocompromised, just don't have that choice. So where there are those areas where young people or people who don't have the choice to get vaccinated, that is the area where we have to be the most careful, the most cautious.
Who do you think actually bears the cost of all this? I think I have an idea.
Well, it's parents and it's government. And so it's parents from a day-to-day disruption life. Certainly, from my own personal experience raising a young baby in COVID times, I'm not going out as much. Now that has a psychological burden, but it also has an economic one as well for my community around me. But ultimately, if we're talking about those tens of millions of dollars, that right now is falling to the provincial taxpayer.
Ultimately, what do you think needs to be done to prevent such a huge hit to the economy?
Well, the number one thing is continuing to invest in vaccines. So as we've shown, that 11-to-1 return on investment, every dollar spent on vaccine education reduces the economic cost, and just continuing to show the value of vaccines, why it is a strong and healthy choice, not only for ourselves, but for the community around us. I think that's the best course of action if people can get informed, and more importantly, shots in arms. That goes a really long way.
Matt Scobrook is with Leverage Point Consulting. He is also a regular business columnist with our French counterparts in Radio Canada.
The tiny arrow on your car's fuel gauge. Speaking of your car, how about the minuscule treadwear indicators on your car tires? And then there's the bread clip. Terry O'Reilly tips his hat to the tiny, small innovations that make our lives better. Small wonders, tiny inventions, big impact on Under the Influence. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
The ongoing crisis in the Middle East is putting pressure on markets around the world. Here at home, Canadians are experiencing stock market swings as investors try to understand what this conflict means for our money long term. All of this can make us feel more anxious about our finances. Personal finance columnist Rubina Ahmed Haq has more on how we can manage our stress through these uncertain times.
Capitulate. The first time I heard that word in relation to our money was during the 2008 financial crisis. At that time, markets were falling sharply in response to news that the U.S. housing market was vulnerable to collapse. Fast forward to today, and we are faced with yet another crisis, this time in the Middle East.
It is very reasonable to be anxious when you're seeing that volatility.
Liz Enrique is a personal finance educator at Ambitious Adulting based in Hamilton, Ontario. She works with clients to help them better understand how their finances work. In her experience, periods of uncertainty have always existed.
We watched the Twin Towers collapse. We watched Y2K and people freaking out about the internet ending, and then there was always talks about the end of the world, and then COVID, and before that it was the financial crisis. And there's just always been something, and I like to remind people that yes, there was also the war in Ukraine, and that was volatilities.
Her advice is to zoom out. Take a look at your investments, not day to day, but year to year. How have your investments been performing over the last decade? What is your average rate of return? This will make you feel better about your overall financial situation.
My advice is to not panic, to not make any rash decisions, and to get in touch with your professional if you're nervous.
Kelly Ho is a certified financial planner based in Vancouver. She says the frequency of news impacting the markets is ramping up, and that is affecting her clients. Many, she says, are asking her about the American economy and if they should divest their U.S. stocks. She says this is a short-term point of view that can hurt your finances.
I get that question a lot. And the way I look at it is we have to take a step back. And we have to look at, what are the consequences of entirely isolating one of the largest economies or the largest economy in the world and what impact that could be in the long run. Because right now we're constantly bombarded with headlines every single day.
She says in many ways, the frequency of bad news has actually made her clients more resilient. Ho says lately she gets fewer panicked calls when the market dips. And for her, that means she's doing her job as a financial planner.
What I always tell clients is let's not waste an opportunity where we can look at their situation and make sure that they're good and that what we put in place this many years ago, this is why we did it. And this is why we did not follow whatever headlines or whatever headwinds there were. And this is, at the end of the day, the reason why we do financial planning.
Financial educator Enrique says her agenda is to help clients manage their money on their own. That means understanding the importance of diversification. So not keeping all your investments in one stock or industry, making regular contributions and not trying to time the market, and staying focused on your long-term goals and not attempting to make money quickly. She also believes financial therapy can help deal with our anxiety.
You know, we tell ourselves stories of like, oh my gosh, this could happen or this could happen, and go through different scenarios. And sometimes those scenarios might not play out. And so that helps me bring it back to what is actually happening, and can I kind of move on from this because this is a feeling that I'm ruminating on internally.
Both women say volatility is a normal part of the economy, and understanding how to manage it is key to building your financial resilience. And most importantly, don't capitulate when you get a few days of bad news. For CBC Radio, I'm Rubina Ahmed Haq.
That is personal finance columnist Rubina Ahmed Haq.
All this rattling on full of fancy words I can't follow along. There's all the questions when the premise is wrong. Call me exhausted from the conversation. There's all the money when your body's gone. Walking down the street like they're walking along. They want a statue. They want it in bronze. They want a statue. Where would it belong? Come on. Everlasting light. In the sun, in the moon, in the corner, see it glow by the neon sign. Come on. Yeah, we all got secrets. We got something to hide. What do you do with the money, with the money? Oh, when the money gets tight. Work it, work it. Work it, work it. Work it, work it. Sirens from the ambulance start looking around for the accident. The line behind was growing fabulous, and I swear I'm not some kind of activist. The Lord started acting ravenous. The businessmen started doing calculus. It was a good idea, and they ran with it. Now everybody chasing that ambulance. Oh, that everlasting light. In the sun, in the moon, in the corner, see it glow by the neon sign. Come on, yeah, we all got secrets. We got something to hide. What do you do with the money, with the money? When the money gets tight. When the money gets tight.
New music out of Hamilton. That was the Arkells with What Good. Still ahead here on Information Radio, Canada's Centre for Cybersecurity is warning that even though Iran's missiles can't hit Canada, their cyber attacks can. We're going to hear from a tech analyst coming up about Canada's vulnerabilities. Stay tuned for that. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It's minus 14 right now. We're feeling normal today. A high this afternoon of minus 4, and that is the normal high this time of year. Prime Minister Mark Carney is not ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacks Canada or its allies. The Prime Minister addressed the Australian Parliament today, outlining his foreign policy vision. In a news conference afterwards, Carney was asked if Canada might join the U.S. and Israeli-led war against Iran.
So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies. But it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
Carney next travels to Japan, the final stop on his overseas trip. Now, Iran has launched a new wave of attacks against Israel and American bases this morning, vowing the U.S. will bitterly regret sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. A high-ranking Ayatollah is now calling for the shedding of American blood. Meanwhile, Israel says its own large-scale strikes have hit ballistic missile sites and infrastructure in Tehran. In New Delhi, Iran's ambassador to India, Mohammad Fatali, says the West has destroyed any hope for diplomacy.
They destroyed the negotiation table. They started the war. You know that the duration of the war in our hands. This is very important.
The conflict is spreading rapidly, with Azerbaijan now accusing Iran of a drone strike on its territory that injured 2 civilians. The war is entering day 6 now, and the death toll in Iran has climbed above 1,000. You can hear the latest on this story, as well as other national and international news, coming up on World Report at 7. A Manitoba First Nations leader is pushing the province to update its training regulations for security guards. This after a man was charged with using brass knuckles while subduing an alleged shoplifter in Winnipeg. Eric Robinson with the Indigenous Peoples Alliance says First Nations are regularly profiled by security guards, and he says more de-escalation and cultural sensitivity training are needed to stop the trend. Meanwhile, a security guard trainer in northern Manitoba wants the province to revisit its temporary licensing exemption. It allows adults to be employed as security guards for up to 6 months while they wait to be trained and pass the province's exam. The government says this kind of license is only valid once and is only given in exceptional cases. But Peter De Beer says it can be a public safety risk, even if it's given to someone who has no law enforcement or de-escalation experience.
The person does not know. Where do you get your legal rights from? How are you supposed to do things? Are you allowed to use force or are you not allowed to use force? And if you are allowed to use force, when does it come that you use force? They have no knowledge or none whatsoever. So this could cause a huge problem.
The province granted just over 150 temporary licenses during the last fiscal year. The province has launched public consultations to learn more about how Manitobans feel about artificial intelligence. It wants to know about the risks of AI, like identity theft, deep fakes, and the misuse of personal data. Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says the consultations are a good thing.
All governments in all countries need to be looking at this and doing something about it, but we're happy to see that our provincial government is stepping up and starting to have these very important conversations.
The consultations will focus on updating data privacy laws and creating clear rules around how to use AI responsibly. The results will help the province consider whether to put age limits on the technology. A 14-year-old hockey phenom playing for the under-15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings is turning heads in the hockey world. Cale Nichol finished with the highest points per game in Winnipeg's AAA league. In fact, he broke Winnipeg Jet Jonathan Toews' record set more than 20 years ago. Nichol's parents, Kurt and Carrie, say even though their son's already catching the attention of the Western Hockey League, he's still focusing on his team's play in the playoffs.
He's pretty down to earth, and he's got a good head on his shoulders.
And we're a humble family. It's just, the team and coaches and parents have just supported us, and try to not draw attention away from team because it's a team game and Cale's a team kid.
Nichol has been touted as a potential early pick in next year's WHL Bantam draft. This weekend, he and his team are competing for the provincial title in Brandon against the Winnipeg Bruins. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Good for him.
It's a great story.
Just amazing. And also his parents sound very humble and down to earth too, I have to say, in those clips that you ran, Heather. So.
Yeah, they really do. They're keeping him grounded, right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news. It is 6:35 and you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Well, let's turn our attention now to the forecast. Abby Adiemi joins us once again, and it's almost the same story. Maybe not as severe and drastic as yesterday, Abby, but still cold to the north and warming up here a little bit in the south.
Yeah, seasonal. We will be touching our seasonal for Winnipeg today. Marjorie, have you noticed the past couple of days, we say it's going to be a cloudy day, and then sometime around the noon period, you're just going to find that little hole in the sky and the sun is just coming through. That seems to be like the trend that would happen into the weekend. It's going to be cloudy, and then somewhere in between, there's just going to be that hole up there, and the sun is just going to bring some sunshine down. So that will definitely warm things up for most regions in the south, but up north, it's a different story. We're still seeing those deep freeze really holding things down. There's a risk of frostbite for most of the regions up north. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region at this time, we're looking at temperatures around -14, -15 with ice crystals in the air. Though the morning temperature is going to be hovering near -12 for much of the day. You can expect cloudy skies, and we have a good chance of light snow and that risk of freeze and drizzle to come with that. We will reach our seasonal high of -4 today under light winds. And then tonight, some fog patches might develop, so look out for that if you will be commuting in the overnight period. Now, from Morden towards Winkler, heading all the way to Headingley and Port Louis Prairie, we're seeing temperatures around -13 at this time. Also cloudy in that region, heading for a high of -6. A good chance of snow and freeze and drizzle also in the forecast. Now, for Brandon, tracking it towards Nipawin this morning, we're seeing temperatures around -16, -17s there. Highs would get to -9. Gimli, you're at -15. Cloudy with a high of -6. A good chance of freeze and drizzle in the forecast. Now, from Dauphin, tracking it all the way towards Russell and the Roblin area, we're seeing conditions cloudy there. -17 at this time with snow beginning sometime this morning. You get to warm up to about -11 later in the day, but look out for slippery roads due to the freezing drizzle that will be coming that way. Now, in the northern part of the province, where we're seeing temperatures hover between -20 and -26, the power actually tracking near -20 at this time. Light snow, they get to warm up to about -13. Thompson Lynn Lake, we're seeing temperatures around -20 at this time, but the wind chill is getting to be a concern. We're seeing it close to -35. Gillam is at -27. The wind chill around -36 already. Lynn Lake, we're looking at frigid -22 at this time with light snow falling there. Wind chill around the Turuli Lake region, we're seeing -48 already. And for Churchill, -26 ice crystals there. Dangerous wind chills of -40 already in place in the Churchill and York region. But overall, it's more like that's wintry dry for the south with seasonal highs in most of the regions, while the dangerous cold is still the factor in the northern part of the province. Winnipeg, -14, and we get to -4 later.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Sierra Sanders joins us now in studio with a look at that morning commute, and you actually have some news.
I have some news. Very exciting stuff because it has been a very quiet week on the commuter line so far. Got a call from Zach about a fire on Archibald going north. So this fire is just after Mission, right before the underpass there on Archibald. There are multiple fire trucks on scene. He said just the curb lane going north is blocked, so not too much. There shouldn't be too much backups there, but you want to keep an eye out for those fire trucks as they get that situation under control there. So a fire on Archibald just after Mission, right before the underpass. There are multiple fire trucks on scene tending to that situation, and he did mention that just the curb lane going north seems to be blocked. So there shouldn't be too much of an issue there getting around there, but just go slow as those folks try and get that situation under control. As well, heard from Dan on a bike. Thank you, Dan, for giving us a call. Rapid transit is looking all clear there if you are getting out there on that corridor there. The rapid transit looking all clear there. So it should be a pretty smooth ride out there if you are walking or biking or however you are getting around there. Looks pretty good there. So be like Zach and Dan and give me a call on the commuter line if something is getting in your way or there's something you want to let me know about. Give me a call. The number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. It is now 6:40, and it is time to check in now with Christelle Ramlakan and a look at your morning business report. Good morning, Christelle.
Hey, good morning, Marjorie.
Shipping crisis is deepening as the conflict in the Middle East continues. Can you break down that story for us?
Yes, so shipping through the Strait of Hormuz is paralyzed, and the war has choked off vital Middle East oil and gas flows. So tankers have been stranded going on 6 days now, and the war has widened after a U.S. strike hit an Iranian warship off Sri Lanka. And the strike came as U.S. President Donald Trump pledged to provide insurance and Navy escorts to ships exporting oil and gas in an attempt to contain soaring energy prices. At least 200 ships remain anchored and hundreds of other vessels remain outside the strait, unable to reach ports. And the waterway is a key artery for around a fifth of the world's oil and LNG supply. At least 8 vessels have been hit in the area since the conflict began on Saturday. Qatar is fully shutting down gas liquefaction and won't return to normal production and exports for at least a month after attacks on production facilities there. Iraq has cut its oil production as the country ran out of storage, unable to load it on tankers. And Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait are also struggling to load oil. So oil prices did dip yesterday, but that's after shooting up 12% since the war started Saturday. And for Canada, the conflict is likely to lead to higher prices for gas and diesel and increased prices for imported goods.
I know that in Winnipeg, some folks have already reported seeing higher gas prices. Of course, don't know if it's related to that, but I think that's what a lot of people anticipate due to this. Next, Crystal Lee, the U.S. government is now on the hook for President Trump's tariffs. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's right. A U.S. judge says American importers are owed tariff refunds. And this is after the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs last month. America's top court says Trump's sweeping and erratic Liberation Day tariffs and fentanyl-related duties on Canada, Mexico, and China were unconstitutional. And it concluded the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which was used to implement tariffs, did not actually allow for them. So now the Supreme Court ruling did not say whether there should be refunds, which has led to companies suing the U.S. government to get their money back. And this specific refund ruling was in a case brought by a filtration company in Tennessee. And the judge says he will be the only judge to hear cases about refunds.
Finally, Apple has announced its cheapest ever new MacBook. What's behind that decision?
The launch of the new MacBook Neo signals a fresh attempt to court Windows and Chromebook customers and ramp up growth as ongoing chip shortages rattle the broader market. It's the first Apple laptop to run on a chip typically used in the iPhone and starts at around $800 Canadian. Now, that does sound expensive, but it is cheaper than their regular MacBooks. The iPhone is Apple's biggest moneymaker, but Mac computers are critical for ensuring iPhone and Apple Watch users remain steeped within Apple's ecosystem of products and services. And Apple is straying from its typical playbook by appealing to cost-conscious consumers. And expanding to new audiences could be critical as the industry grapples with an ongoing memory shortage that some analysts say will decimate the market for affordable laptops. Now, compared to other MacBooks, the Neo has a smaller screen, less memory, and is available in brighter colors. But the major factor is that it's using a chip similar to the one that powers the iPhone 16 Pro.
$800 deemed a bargain.
When it comes to Apple products, I guess.
Yeah. Crystal Lee, have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
You too. Thanks, Marjorie.
Take care. That is Crystal Lee Ramlakan with your morning business news. Saskatoon rockers The Sheepdogs have just released a new album. Here is one of their brand new tracks. It has already placed on CBC Music's weekly top 20 list. This is Keep Out of the Storm from The Sheepdogs.
since I turned 18, like living in a bad, bad dream. Now it's time to draw the line out at the borderline. If you know what I mean, I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. How long has this been going on? Feels like I'm under a spell. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. Long gone now, babe, I can't go on. I know you cannot as well. No signs of stopping, it's coming on strong. They keep on ringing that bell. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to hide it, keep it warm. I got to keep out of the stove. I got to find another home. I got to keep out of the
That was the Sheepdogs with Keep Out of the Storm from their recently released album. The band, by the way, is setting out on tour later this month, and they will be in Winnipeg on April 17th at the Burton Cummings Theatre.
Do you agree with me on this? Yes. Wait a minute. Am I talking to myself?
When we debate online, we may as well be talking in an echo chamber. CBC is changing that. Manitoba Talks, a matching software that brings together people with opposing views. Different views, one conversation. Sign up today and challenge your perspective at cbc.ca/MB Talks.
6:49 now. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg. Everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Right now in Thompson, light snow being reported at -20. In the Paw right now, cloudy and -18. In Dauphin, you're under a cloudy sky, -17. Churchill Ice Crystals, -26. Brandon, light snow and -16. Here in Winnipeg, well, we're looking at some flurries today. Actually, flurries, chance of flurries, freezing drizzle in the daytime. Becoming periods of snow this evening, looking to get up to a high of -4 today. And tonight, periods of snow mixed with freezing drizzle and a low of -10. Well, Iran continues to retaliate to the ongoing attacks from the United States and Israel. So far, that response has mostly been missile strikes against targets inside neighboring Persian Gulf countries. The U.S. consulate in Dubai, for example. But the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is warning that Iran will also use cyber attacks, and Canada could be in the crosshairs. Carmi Levy is a technology analyst and joins us now here on Information Radio. Good morning, Carmi.
Good morning, Marjorie. So great to be with you.
Thank you for being with us. The Centre for Cybersecurity says that we could see cyber attacks against, quote, critical infrastructure. What would that look like?
So it could be something as simple as a power outage, targeting the electrical grid. It could be the water system. You open your tap and nothing comes out. Or maybe the healthcare system. You go to the hospital, their computer networks are down. They've reverted to paper. Or even transportation networks. You're driving to work and the traffic lights are all out, and there's traffic chaos on the roads. And so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but really these are kind of the underpinnings of modern society. And when you take them away, that can cause some very significant chaos, kind of give Iran, a tactical advantage without having to fire a shot clear across the ocean.
Carmi, how vulnerable are these elements of critical infrastructure?
We're a lot more vulnerable than we probably think we should be. In many cases, for example, look at the headlines in recent years of Canadian cities, regional governments, even provincial governments, zoos, libraries that have been targeted with ransomware attacks. And that suggests very clearly that at a public level, public-facing level, we are not investing in appropriate technologies, training processes to maximize our resilience against this kind of thing. So if we're already suffering from ransomware attacks across the country, then that leaves the door open to other kinds of attacks from state-sponsored interests like Iran or their partners in crime, Russia, China, North Korea. We simply haven't been taking this seriously as we should, and as a result, we've been seeing for years this gradual increase in this kind of activity, and it's costing us dearly.
Carmi, I mean, is it possible that some of these systems are too old, too analog to be vulnerable to a type of cyber attack like this?
To a certain degree, that is true. For example, for the longest time, ICBMs in the U.S. were run on systems based on 8-inch floppies that had been first introduced in the 1960s. And the thinking then was, well, this technology is so old, there's no way that a cyber attacker would even bother to pay attention. But the flip side of that is that that's the kind of attitude that can get us into trouble. If we assume that we're invulnerable, that there's no way that we could be targeted because this technology is so old, that's when cyber attackers target us. That's when they look for those weak points and bore right in. And so no matter how old or new our technology might be, we should never assume that we are somehow magically protected against this kind of thing, because that's the kind of attitude that always seems to get us into trouble.
So, Carmi, as you mentioned, I mean, this critical infrastructure, it's important for our daily lives and for everything to be functioning here properly. So why aren't these then better protected?
I think it's just cybersecurity. It's almost like insurance. It's something that we only pay attention to when an emergency happens. You don't wake up in the morning and think about your insurance policy, but I can guarantee you that's top of mind if your house catches fire and you've got to call them and make a claim. And cybersecurity is very much the same way. If we're not being victimized, or individuals or family members or friends or companies immediately adjacent to us, if they're not being victimized, we just don't pay attention until something happens. And that, of course, needs to change, because the best time for a cybersecurity checkup is not after an attack has occurred, it's beforehand. And so we need to start changing our ways. We need to start tightening our individual password protocols, no longer using the same password we've been using since high school, using unique passwords across different systems, activating two-factor authentication and encryption, and all the things that would keep us safer. But for whatever reason, it's almost like drinking and driving. We know what the best practices are, yet for whatever reason, we haven't decided that that's a priority in our day-to-day lives, and that's what's making us less safe than we probably want to be.
The Center for Cybersecurity lists multiple possible points of attack beyond critical infrastructure. Who or what else is vulnerable?
We as individuals are vulnerable. And the thing is, we tend to think of cyber attacks as, well, they're going after money. But that's not the case here. What they're really doing is trying to target us as individuals on a mass scale, grabbing our data wherever they possibly can, grabbing access to systems that we frequent, and also making systems that we use unavailable. So distributed denial of service attacks. We go to visit a website and it is no longer available. It's down. We try to run an app and it just doesn't connect. That could be one example example of it. There could be in our inboxes, there will be password resets that we did not request. There will be fake job offers that we never asked for showing up in our LinkedIn accounts. All of these things might not seem related to state-sponsored cyber activity, but in fact they are very closely related. And in fact, just looking at my own accounts before we went to air, I'm seeing a lot more now than I was even just a couple of weeks ago. So it's already happening now, and it doesn't always scream cyber attack. It doesn't scream this is related to geopolitics, and as a result, it doesn't get our attention. We probably might want to slow things down a little bit and pay that extra attention because it is putting us at additional risk.
Carmi, how much can actions like this advance the interests of the Iranian regime?
Significantly, because if we think about geopolitically sort of where we're at, our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, he hasn't committed Canadian military assets yet, but he's left the door open to that. And he certainly has shared his support of what is happening here. And we know that Iran, not exactly Canada's best friend, the regime has always been at sort of cross purposes with us. And now that we're kind of on the side of the U.S., that gives Iran even more of a reason to come at us in the digital space. If there are successful prosecutions digitally against Canada, that could give Ottawa pause about what they choose to do militarily, what the timing, what resources they choose to devote to it. You can push back on an adversary without firing a shot, and that's what Iran's game plan is here. Give Canada something to think about if it wants to involve itself in this conflict.
Carmi, very interesting. Really do appreciate you joining us on the show this morning. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Marjorie.
Carmi Levy is a technology analyst and journalist. 6:57 now. Let's check in with Heather Wells and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. A Manitoba First Nations leader is pushing the province to update its training regulations for security guards. This after a man was charged with using brass knuckles while subduing an alleged shoplifter in Winnipeg. Eric Robinson with the Indigenous Peoples Alliance says First Nations are regularly profiled by security guards, and he says that trend needs to stop. A 14-year-old hockey phenom playing under the 15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings has made league history. Cale Nicholl smashing a point-per-game record set by Winnipeg's Jonathan Taves when he was a teenager more than 20 years ago. Cale says it's great, but he really doesn't feel affected by it a lot. He's focusing on the playoffs. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Right now in Winnipeg, it is minus 14 ice crystals right now, on our way to a high of minus 4 with some mixed precipitation, some light snow, some freezing drizzle quite possibly here in Winnipeg. I do want to mention a traffic issue. Archibald near Mission. Number of fire trucks reported on scene. So if that is part of your morning commute, something to be aware of. Now, still ahead here in the next hour of the show, Manitoba's lone Paralympian is gearing up for the 2026 Paralympic Games. More from him and his guide about how important their connection is during competition. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM here in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, World Report.
On the Current.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Do you have a friend group? It turns out that Canadians are actually spending less and less time with our friends. Many of us don't have a friend group. What exactly is a friend group, and what does it mean in terms of how we should approach making new friends? We'll talk about that on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
Today's events, or recent events, point to that. So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is not ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacks Canada or its allies. It follows news that a missile launched from Iran was intercepted by NATO air defenses as it headed towards Turkish airspace. Carney says there's a clear distinction between the current U.S. mission and what happens if the conflict spirals.
We're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister says it is not the time for a ceasefire. Speaking to Parliament in Canberra, Carney told Australian MPs the two Commonwealth countries must draw closer together, warning that the global order is now breaking down. This as Iran launches a new wave of attacks against Israel and American bases this morning, vowing the U.S. will bitterly regret sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. A high-ranking Ayatollah is now calling for the shedding of American blood. Meanwhile, Israel says its own large-scale strikes have struck ballistic missile sites and infrastructure in Tehran. In New Delhi, Iran's ambassador to India, Mohammad Fatali, says that the West destroyed any hope of diplomacy.
They destroyed the negotiation table. They started the war. You know that the duration of the war in our hands. This is very important.
The conflict is spreading rapidly, with Azerbaijan now accusing Iran of a drone strike on its territory that injured 2 civilians. As the war enters its 6th day, the death toll in Iran has climbed above 1,000. As the war with Iran widens, a number of European nations are taking action to prevent the conflict from reaching their shores. This comes after a drone hit a British air base on Cyprus earlier this week, and NATO intercepted that ballistic missile headed towards Turkey yesterday. Anna Cunningham is in our London bureau. Anna, what's the latest on Europe's response to the conflict?
Well, John, Europe, in terms of EU nation countries, has been a bit disjointed. They are not speaking as one. But what we are seeing is individual nations ramping up the defence of Cyprus, that island nation in the eastern Mediterranean Sea on the edge of the Middle East. We have had it confirmed that Spain is now going to be sending a warship to Cyprus. It will reach there about March the 10th. As well as that, France is relocating the Charles de Gaulle from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. We know that Greece has sent 2 frigates to Cyprus, and the British warship is not going to be ready to leave the UK for about another week.
Meanwhile, Anna, NATO Secretary General is also speaking about the war. What's he saying?
Yeah, some interesting comments coming from the NATO chief, Mark Rutte. There has been concern that Turkey, which is a NATO member country, it has been dealing with a missile that landed in Turkey. And concerns have been raised as to whether this would validate invoking Article 5, which, of course, is this NATO article. When one NATO country is attacked, then all NATO countries are called to come to its defence. Take a listen.
Nobody's talking about Article 5. And the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant. So they see and know and sense that our military are on this.
The one thing that the NATO chief did say, which will be concerning, is that he does not see how this ends.
CBC's Anna Cunningham in London. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, John.
Meanwhile, British maritime authorities say a tanker off the coast of Kuwait has been hit. There are reports of a large explosion and oil in the water. It comes as Iran claims passage through the strategic Strait of Hormuz is now under its control, creating a stranglehold of 20% of the world's oil supply. And as Anis Sadari reports, the crisis is creating a potential opportunity for Canada's energy sector.
There's certainly a sense that we've missed the last boat.
Heather Exner-Pirro believes Canada hasn't expanded its capacity to export oil and gas fast enough in the past, but there's still long-term demand for alternatives to the Middle East. She's with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute just outside Calgary.
If you're in Asia in particular, you would say, wow, I really hope that other provider starts providing more, starts producing more, so that we can have a bit more redundancy, a bit more diversity.
Whether that other provider is Canada or not isn't guaranteed, but she says she expects movement.
So I do feel as though there will be an effort to make sure that the oil and the LNG can start to flow, because no one wants to see a $90 or $100 barrel. That would create a shock.
Though Canada can't make up for everything that can't exit the Persian Gulf.
You're not going to totally replace that.
Tristan Goodman heads up the Explorers and Producers Association of Canada. He says his industry can export more, but there's still a capacity limit.
You probably do need additional
egress, which is really talking about pipe. There's a bit of opportunity in rail, but not much. It's quite expensive.
Blocking the Strait of Hormuz may be a new problem, highlighting an old concern in Canada, with an industry saying even when customers want or need to buy, it's running out of capacity to sell to them. Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
China is cutting its annual economic growth target to a level not seen in decades. Beijing is now aiming for expansion between 4.5 and 5% as it faces low domestic consumption and global uncertainty. The announcement comes during the biggest political meeting of the year, dubbed the Two Sessions. CBC's Lisa Shing is in Beijing.
In the capital's legislative building, the Great Hall of the People, thousands of delegates from all over the country are gathered for the Two Sessions, or Lianghui, the meeting of the country's top advisory and legislative bodies. These delegates aren't just politicians. Basketball legend Yao Ming among them for several years now, and business leaders like CEO of tech giant Xiaomi, Lei Jun. In the past, even actor Jackie Chan was among them. The focal point, Chinese Premier Li Cheng tabling the key government work report, targeting a moderate 4.5 to 5% GDP growth this year, but saying the world's second largest economy will strive for higher, a nod to China's stagnant consumption. Tackling that is a key priority, he says. Alex Zhou is a consultant with China Macro Group in Shanghai.
The principle is to help people get rid of the social security burden, so you have more space to spend.
The meeting will also cement China's policy priorities over the next 5 years, with continued focus on tech and AI advancement and self-reliance. Nick Chan is one of the delegates.
A lot of cooperation, a lot of good ideas coming out. Good news for China is good news for the world.
The two sessions are happening as China weathers U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war and as President Xi Jinping welcomes a parade of leaders to the capital, including Trump himself, later this month. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Beijing.
The newly announced BC Coroner's Service inquest into the Tumbler Ridge tragedy may well look at the role of red flag orders that they played in the case. The red flag, a type of emergency order that grants police the power to seize firearms, but a CBC News investigation into whether the relatively new policy is actually working has turned up some surprising results. Jonathan Gatehouse reports.
We will empower victims, communities, doctors, families.
It was a key part of the government's response to the Portapique, Nova Scotia mass shooting back in 2020. Red flag orders, a faster, more direct way to remove legal firearms from those who might inflict danger to themselves or others. Then Public Safety Minister Bill Blair touted them as a game changer.
Red flag laws will empower us to keep Canadians safe.
But 2 years after those changes finally became law, it seems that no one knows if they are working. In the wake of the Tumbler Ridge tragedy, where police seized guns from the shooter's family, CBC News asked how often red flag orders are being granted. Approaching all chief firearms officers, provincial police services, and Public Safety Canada, none of them had answers. Our requests were passed on to the RCMP. They found just one red flag order, a 2025 case from Ontario. This doesn't sit right with Queen's University policy expert Dr. Christian Leuprecht.
Much of what we do on gun policy in this country has no grounding in evidence.
Gun control advocates like Wendy Sukier say there needs to be more focus on implementation.
The fact is the police have had the power to remove firearms from people where they think there is a threat to that individual or any other person since the law was changed in 1995.
Current Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari declined an interview request and did not respond to questions about the data gap. Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. In this morning, it is so nice to have you join us here on the show. Coming up on this hour, would you get married beside a Ferris wheel? Coming up, we'll tell you about a special contest that can make that fairy tale dream happen. Stay tuned for that after 7:30. Also, recent data shows Gen Z are less likely to own cars than young people in previous generations. Coming up later on the show, a conversation with an automotive industry journalist about why that trend is happening. Also, Scott Regier will join us with the very latest in morning sports. Stay tuned for that. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. At 7:11 with a look at your CBC morning headlines, here now is Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the province is launching public consultations to learn more about how you feel about artificial intelligence. It wants to know about the risks of AI, identity theft, deep fakes, and the misuse of personal data. We're going to hear from Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, who says these consultations are a good thing. A security guard trainer in northern Manitoba wants the province to revisit its temporary licensing exemption. It allows adults to be employed as security guards for up to 6 months while they wait to be trained and pass the province's exam. But Peter De Beer says it can be a public safety risk if given to someone who has no law enforcement or de-escalation experience. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells with a look at your morning headlines. Let's say good morning to our crew here on the morning show. Darren Morash is running our feed on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Sarah Sanders is answering the commuter line there and has all your traffic tips. And Abby Adiyemi keeping an eye on that forecast. And Abby, it's another cold one today in the north.
Yeah, still that split happening with the deep freeze really holding the northern parts of the province, and down south we're seeing mild conditions, though we're going to be getting light snow and freezing drizzle around the Brandon area. This time we're seeing blowing snow and drifts, so if you're on the highway, take it easy if you're driving in the Westman region. For Winnipeg right now, ice crystals still in the air, temperatures hovering around -14 to start the day. Expect cloudy skies, a good chance of light snow along with the risk of freezing drizzle as we reach a high of seasonal -4 under some light breeze today. Morning temperatures can be hovering around -12 before we hit that -4 later in the day. While for tonight, expect some fog patches to develop into the overnight period. Across the southern regions, we're looking at cloudy stats also. Temperatures near -16s, -17, wind chills around -23, and highs will be close to -8. Up north, we're seeing temperatures around -25, 26, with a wind chill close to -49 around the Tudela Lake and Churchill region. So overall, we still have that mix of, winter precipitation in the south, while the extreme life-threatening cold still gripping the northern part of the province. Winnipeg, -14 with ice crystals.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's turn our attention now to Sarah Sanders, who joins us now in studio. And we had an incident earlier today that was Archibald and Mission. What's the very latest on that, Sarah?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten an update on that situation quite yet. But just for folks who are just tuning in now, we got a call from Zach in the last hour about a fire on Archibald. And the fire was just after Mission, right before the underpass there. There were multiple fire trucks on scene, he said, tending to the situation and getting that under control. And he mentioned that just the curb lane going north was blocked. Mind you, so this was in the last hour of the show, so things might have changed a little bit. So that was a fire on Archibald just after Mission, right before the underpass. Multiple fire trucks on scene tending to the situation, and Zach, the caller, had mentioned that the curb lane going north was blocked. So just one lane there that was blocked due to those fire trucks tending to the situation and those folks getting that under control. Haven't gotten any updates so far on that situation. So if you're in the area or you are driving past, and you can safely give us a call and give me an update on that situation, that'd be greatly appreciated, so I can let your fellow listeners and commuters know what is going on out there on the roads. But if a new situation has popped up and something is getting in your way, causing some backups, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, whether you are here in the city or anywhere else in the province. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
Quarter after 7 now. The 2026 Milano Cortina Paralympic Winter Games kick off tomorrow. 600 athletes from around the globe are gearing up for competition in 6 winter sports. They include para-alpine skiing, para-biathlon, para-cross-country skiing, para-ice hockey, para-snowboarding, and wheelchair curling. And there's one lone Manitoban competing in this year's games. Originally from Winnipeg, Jesse Baczynski is competing in para-Nordic skiing. He was born with no central vision, and by the age of 15, he was diagnosed with a degenerative eye disease. He competes with his guide, Levi Nadler-Smith, who hails from Boissevain, Manitoba. And they both join me now from Milan. Well, good morning. Actually, good afternoon to you both there.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have you right now both joining us on Zoom. Where are you exactly?
So we just finished a ski or training session this morning at the Predazzo kind of race site at Val di Fiemme, Italy.
Northern Italy.
Yeah, Northern Italy. So we just finished an hour and a half ski on the race courses, and we were practicing a bunch of the downhills. And yeah, you just caught us right after our ski. So.
Well, we really do appreciate you joining us on the show today. Jesse, the games are kicking off tomorrow. How are you feeling?
I am feeling super excited and proud to represent Canada, and I think Manitoba has stuck with me all over the years, and I'm very, very grateful.
Well, we're proud of you, and we're sticking with you here in Manitoba.
Yeah, no, I feel like ready and prepared, and definitely things are going really well.
Tell us, Jesse, a little bit more. What para-Nordic events will you be competing in?
So the first event will be a classic 1.5 sprint, and then the next day will be a 10K classic.
Jesse, when did you first get interested in Nordic skiing?
I got interested in 2014 with a lady, or with a friend of my mom's named Pam McDonald and Jackie Hummelbrunner. They both got me into Nordic skiing, and I loved it ever since. And yeah, I feel really lucky to be able to just be here and ski for all of you guys. And yeah, it's a proud moment.
And you are international. You're the only Manitoban, in fact, that's competing at the Paralympic Games. Levi, when did you and Jesse start working together?
I think it's probably around 2016. Jesse was racing at the International Peace Gardens in southern Manitoba, and he needed a guide for the weekend. I live right around there, so I was able to step up and kind of guide him for a race. And then I've been guiding him off and on for about the last 10 years or so.
Give us a little bit more insight into how do you prepare for something that is as big as this, Levi? What does it take to get ready for these games?
Okay.
Yeah, there's tons of preparation, especially when you are visually impaired. There's a lot of repetition and kind of teamwork and communication between the guide and athlete. So we spend lots of time just doing the course and training together and making sure that we have a lot of confidence in each other's skiing ability to get around this course. It's a pretty, it's an Olympic course, obviously, and a Paralympic course, so it's a very challenging course. And so, yeah, it takes a lot of focus and preparation to race it.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Jesse? Because you had something to say about preparations. What's it been like for you?
Well, it's a lot of hard work and dedication. And there's an old saying, athlete is made in the summer. So we do a lot of dryland training, like running, roller skiing, strength, and that also carries over into the winter. And when it comes time, we correct our training plan to make sure we're ready and prepared for any race that we have to do. And yeah.
Jesse, you were born with no central vision and were later diagnosed with a degenerative eye disease. What was it like to receive a diagnosis like that at that age?
Well, I would say I was born visually impaired, but over the years it progressively got worse, and I'm at the point it can't go any worse, but. And I would say I focus on what I can't do and what I can do, and I know I may be blind, but my vision is clear.
Levi, what made you want to get involved in becoming a guide?
Yeah, so I used to compete in cross-country skiing quite a bit, and Jesse caught me at a good time because I was kind of tapering off of my competitive career, so kind of was another way for me to keep skiing and kind of keep engaged in the sport and continue to travel and race around the world. So.
And how important is that connection between an athlete and a guide?
Yeah, definitely. I guess massive. There's a lot of trust. I've tried skiing with blackout goggles a couple times, where my vision is fully blind for a course, and it's terrifying. It makes kind of cross country skiing into a bit of an extreme sport. So you need a ton of trust and faith in your guide and the athlete to get down the sketchy hills and get around the course.
Levi, what has it meant to you to help guide an athlete? What has it done for you yourself as an athlete?
Yeah, it definitely kept me kind of engaged in the sport and continuing to set goals and kind of keep improving. It's definitely a different challenge. It's kind of almost doing a separate sport because it's very technical to guide and kind of a new skill set. So it's been a huge honor to guide for Jesse at these games.
Jesse, you are the only Manitoban who is competing at the Paralympic Games on behalf of Team Canada. How are you feeling about being the only Manitoban there?
I would say I am feeling very proud, and Manitoba has supported me for almost my whole career, and I wouldn't I feel really honored and grateful to everyone that's supported me and my hometown in Canada. I just feel really grateful, and that I had a lot of support, and it's been a wonderful journey.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Jesse, I know that you hope to be a mentor to young kids, but how does it feel to be on this stage and showing kids what you can do?
I would say don't ever stop trying what your heart is in, and anything is possible. Just go out and try it, and don't let anything stop you.
Well, Jesse and Levi, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today here on the show. Good luck. We will be cheering for you so loud here in Manitoba that hopefully you can hear us in Milan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us on the show.
Awesome. Thanks.
Jesse Baczynski is competing in the 2026 Winter Paralympic Games. We also heard from his guide, Levi Nadler-Smith. You can actually catch the action on CBC. The games kick off tomorrow, and you can watch it on CBC and also on CBC Gem.
The tiny arrow on your car's fuel gauge. Speaking of your car, how about the minuscule treadwear indicators on your car tires? And then there's the bread clip. Terry O'Reilly tips his hat to the tiny, small innovations that make our lives better. Small wonders, tiny inventions, big impact on Under the Influence. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
Do you agree with me on this? Yes. Wait a minute. Am I talking to myself?
When we debate online, we may as well be talking in an echo chamber. CBC is changing that. Manitoba Talks, a matching software that brings together people with opposing views. Different views, one conversation. Sign up today and challenge your perspective at cbc.ca/MB Talks.
7:24 now. It is still minus 14 here in Winnipeg at both the airport and the Forks. Ice crystals being reported at the airport, looking to get up to a high of -4. 60% chance of some light snow mixed in with some freezing drizzle. And then tonight we're looking at periods of snow again with freezing drizzle and a low of -10. Earlier, Sierra did tell us about something that might be affecting your commute. Archibald and Mission, there were fire trucks that were reported on the scene while we received an update. And it appears that situation has been cleared up. Again, if you're seeing anything else out there that might be affecting your commute, 204-788-3090. 993. Well, it is time now to check in with Morning Sports. Scott Regier joins us now. Good morning, Scott.
Hey, Marjorie.
And we talked about this yesterday. You actually mentioned it as you were wrapping up your sports report yesterday. Something about Canada and the United States. Let's start with that. A heated rivalry, in this case, the one between Canada and the United States soccer teams.
Yes, the footy foes matched up last night, Marjorie, in Columbus at the She Believes Cup. Heading in, Canada's expectations were tempered since they'd only beaten the U.S. 4 times in 67 tries. Then they learned they'd have to play last night without stars Jesse Fleming and Simi Awujo, who both came down with an illness of some sort. Given all of that, pretty impressive display by the Canadians. They did fall 1-0. Here's their coach, Casey Stoney.
It was definitely an improvement than the last time we played the US. Obviously, we're disappointed to lose, but I'm so proud of the players. I thought they stood up, they were counted, they competed, they put their bodies on the line. Yeah, listen, I can't ask any more. We've had to deal with a lot. We lost Jesse, Simi, but we've come out here, and I think they can be really proud of the progress that they've made. I hope everybody in Canada is proud of this team today.
The last time Canada faced the U.S., they lost 3-0, and frankly, it wasn't even that close. Canada will play Argentina in its final game of this tournament on Saturday. It is a big year, Marjorie, for this Canadian team, which hopes to win a berth in next year's World Cup. Qualifiers for that begin in November, and if they're going to make it through, it looks like Stoney's going to count on several players who are plying their trade domestically. 3 players in last night's lineup were from the Northern Super League, which bodes not only well for the NSL, but for women's soccer in this country in general going forward.
Yeah, Scott, let's move on now to curling. The Brier, of course, underway, and a much-anticipated matchup at the Brier.
I should say so. The Battle of the Brads, Marjorie. Brad Jacobs, who's just won his 2nd career Olympic gold medal, versus Brad Gushu, who has won everything there is in this sport, including Olympic gold, and is set to retire after this season. Now, the last time the Newfoundland and Labrador skip faced Jacobs in St. John's was at the 2024 National. Here's what that sounded like.
Jacobs, last rock.
We should hear some crowd reaction to this one.
Punch it is 1 yellow, and it is a tie game.
People from the Rock, of course, known for their friendliness, unless you're beating one of their own on the pebbled ice. Nobody has beaten either of the Brads at this Brier, not yet. They're both 7-0, and Jacobs was asked what kind of reception he's expecting at the Mary Brown Centre today.
Am I ready to be booed? Well, that's up to them. I'm ready for anything. After the Olympics and about, I don't know, maybe 500 million people calling us cheaters, getting booed is nothing. But the crowd's been so gracious, generous, just really supportive of our team. I mean, we just won Olympic gold, man. You know what I mean? We did that for coast to coast, which starts here on the Rock in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Hear, hear. Mind you, if Jacobs, Mark Kennedy, and the gold medal gang do beat the hometown rink today, they best mind their P's and Q's. That match goes at noon Central Time. Meanwhile, the Manitoba rinks are out on the ice as I speak. Braden Calvert with a 4-2 record, scoreless right now in the second end with New Brunswick. And Matt Dunstone, who's had a great bonspiel. He's at 5-1 and leading Northern Ontario 5-0. That one is in the second end as well.
Ooh, the drama, Scott, the drama. But there's more controversy in curling than usual of late, and that goes for Paralympic bonspiel as well.
There has been a curling steal of a different sort, Marjorie, at the Milano Cortina Games. With the mixed doubles wheelchair competition getting underway last night, organizers discovered a couple of their rocks had been stolen. It's believed someone absconded with them on Monday night. Valued at close to $1,500, but perhaps worth more than that since they were used in the recent Olympics. They are a distinctive bit of contraband. The granite stones come from Ailsa Craig, an island off of Scotland. There are only 128 of them in existence. So a bit like stolen pieces of art, I suppose. If the thieves are ever going to put them on display, it will have to be to a very discerning audience.
Wow.
Oh, curling, right?
Curling, yes.
It's the source of so much intrigue these days.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us here today.
You bet.
That is Scott Regier with a look at your morning sports. Still ahead here. Why does the Red River X want to turn the Midway into a wedding aisle? We're going to find out more coming up. Stay with us. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, we're still at -14, but we are warming up to seasonal today, a high this afternoon of -4. Prime Minister Mark Carney is not ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacks Canada or its allies.
Today's events, or recent events, point to that. So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
This follows news a missile launched from Iran was intercepted by NATO air defenses as it headed towards Turkish airspace. In Australia, Carney says there is a clear distinction between the current U.S. mission and what happens if this conflict spirals.
We're not party to those actions, but we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister says it is not the time for a ceasefire. Now, in the Middle East today, there is heavy fire with the U.S. and Israel attacking Iran and Iranian missiles intercepted over the skies in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Azerbaijan is now accusing Iran of launching a drone attack on its territory. It's the latest sign the conflict is spreading well beyond the borders of Israel and Iran. Meanwhile, Tehran vows bitter regret after the U.S. Navy sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. An Iranian cleric has also called for the shedding of American blood. You can hear the latest on this story and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Here at home, the city of Winnipeg is one step closer to reducing how fast you drive on residential streets. Yesterday, the Public Works Committee voted in favor of asking the province for permission to reduce the default speed limit in the city from 50 to 40 kilometers an hour. Committee Chair Councillor Janice Luke says it's ultimately up to the province to allow them to make broad changes to the default speed.
Allow us to do a default. They have to change the Highway Traffic Act. Otherwise, we have to put up millions of signs at every decision point. So we're asking for a default. So my understanding is if the province goes, yes, you can have a default, my understanding is then council then votes on what is the default.
Luke says once the province makes that decision, councillors will then be able to vote on what the default speed will be. She says she receives calls weekly from people saying vehicles are going too fast on residential streets. Luke's is quick to say the speed reduction would not affect major routes. A Manitoba First Nations leader is pushing the province to update its training regulations for security guards. This after a man was charged with using brass knuckles while subduing an alleged shoplifter in Winnipeg. Eric Robinson is with the Indigenous Peoples Alliance and says First Nations are regularly profiled by security guards. He says more de-escalation and cultural sensitivity training are needed to stop this trend.
That's got to be something that we got to put into our mindset, and at the same time that we're all in this together and we got to find solutions together. We can't be pointing fingers.
The government is working to modernize its security guard training program, including Indigenous awareness education units. The province says changes are expected to come as soon as this fall. The Manitoba government wants to know what you think about artificial intelligence. It has launched public consultations to learn more about the technology's risks while it considers introducing some limits, including age restrictions. Monique St. Germain is the General Counsel for the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. She says the consultations could help identify guardrails to prevent AI-generated child sexual abuse material.
There is already a lot of child sexual abuse material that is on the internet that we have been attempting to deal with it for quite a while, and this is just adding to an already very huge problem.
The province-wide consultations will focus on data privacy laws and creating clear rules around how to use AI responsibly. Well, a 14-year-old hockey phenom playing for the under-15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings has made league history. Cale Nickel has smashed a point-per-game record set more than 20 years ago by Winnipeg's Jonathan Toews when he was a teenager. Nickel and his team are in the playoffs, hoping to be the provincial champs in the Winnipeg AAA League. And when it comes to beating Jonathan Toews' record,
Yeah, it's great. I know it's awesome, but it doesn't really affect me a whole lot. I just keep playing and, yeah, keep going. Just having fun, playing with friends, yeah.
This weekend, Nickel and his teammates start the second round of the provincials. They face off against the Winnipeg Bruins with the first 2 games in Brandon this weekend. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I think we got to ask Jonathan Toews what he thinks.
I think so too.
Now that he's a Winnipeg Jet, I think we need to ask him, hey, how does it feel to have your records broken by Cale in Brandon? I mean, those are some amazing numbers when you really think about it, Heather.
Do you know what? And I feel like, you know how we were saying Cale seems like he's really down to earth, young man. I think Jonathan Toews is much the same way. He'd probably be really happy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC Local News. It is now 7:36, and you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Abby Adeyemi, of course, keeping an eye on what's happening in the sky over northern Manitoba, southern Manitoba, and still kind of split depending on where you are, right, Abby?
Yeah, depending on where you are across the province, we're looking at the deep cold still holding down the northern part of the province. Well, down south, it may feel mild, but we have more like a mix of light snow and freezing drizzle present across the regions today. For Winnipeg right now, we're looking at temperatures still hovering around -14. Ice crystals spotted at the airport. We're heading to a seasonal high of -4 later today. Under cloudy skies, there's a good chance of light snow for the city, and some freezing drizzle will be coming with that, and a light breeze just to keep, the morning wind chill around -22. For Morden, Winkler, Altoona, Morris, all the way towards the U.S. border, we're tracking -13 in that region at this time. Cloudy conditions, a good chance of light snow or freezing drizzle also in the forecast. You get to a high of -6. Gimli, you're sitting at -15 at this time, warming up to -6. Also, freezing drizzle in the forecast for you, along with light snow. Now, Brandon and most of the regions in the Westman area, we're seeing light snow and drifting snow already at this time, and some freezing drizzle later in the day. You get to stay around this temperature for most of the morning, but look out for those blowing snow if you're on the highway today. Around Dauphin, you're around -17 at this time. Cloudy, light snow beginning sometime this morning. You get a high of -11. The power flame flowing, you're hovering between -18 and -19. Light snow and a slim chance of flurries in the forecast for the afternoon period. You warm up to -13. For Thompson and Lynn Lake, you're just between -20 and -21 at this time. You have light snow falling there. You reach a high of -14 later. The wind chill, you get to feel it around -33. So there's a risk of frostbite. Gillam, you're at -26. Wind chill there, -36. And for Tudula Lake, you're at -22 with the wind chill values close to -49. For Churchill, we're seeing ice crystals there, -26, dangerous wind chill, -40 this morning. But Winnipeg, we get to a seasonal high of -4 today. Current temperature is -14.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's turn our attention now to Sierra Sanders, who joins us now in studio. And Sierra, how is that morning commute looking so far?
So far, it's looking pretty good. We had one situation earlier. There was a fire on Archibald just after Mission, right before the underpass. According to the caller, there was multiple fire trucks on scene getting that situation handled. But Chris gave us a call and let us know that that situation is all clear. Things should be moving smoothly there. So there was a fire on Archibald there just after Mission, right before the underpass that the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service was dealing with. It looks to be all clear now. Thanks to Chris for calling that in and giving me an update on that situation. But there's still lots of time left in the show. So if there's something that pops up on your commute that we should know about, whether you are here in the city or anywhere else in the province, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
It is now 7:40, and you are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Well, you've heard about destination weddings, but what about a midway wedding? One lucky couple is getting the chance to say I do right in the middle of the rides and mini donuts this summer at the Red River X. It's part of a new contest called Marriage on the Midway, held by the X's Association. Tara Stolatoni is the marketing manager for the Red River X Association and joins us now via Zoom. Well, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So why host a wedding at the X?
Well, it's because we're we were thinking of a way to introduce our new wedding and event center that's opening in the fall. It's a 13,000 square foot venue on the west side of the park. And we were throwing ideas around, and Garth Rogerson, our CEO, happened to be walking by, and he said, we used to do a marriage on the Midway. And we just ran with it. So back in 2006 or 2007, they used to do that. So we're bringing it back.
Oh, okay. So tell us more about the contest. Who is this open to?
It is open to anyone and everyone, all lovebirds. Maybe you're planning on getting married this year. Maybe you're not. Maybe you've been together forever, and that's just, it would make a good love story. We have tons of romance. The Midway is very romantic with all the sparkling lights and excitement. So yeah, maybe people have a story where they met on the Midway, or their first date was at the X or something like that, or any Manitoba fair, really. Yeah, we just want to make it special for anybody, really.
What would this new event center look like, by the way?
We've actually named it the Gallery because it's going to have a lot of natural light and windows. And it's going to be positioned on one of the lakes on the west side of the property. So it's going to be just a lovely venue, 13,000 square feet. So it'll hold nicely a couple hundred people, and that would be a more intimate setting than some of the larger buildings and more industrial buildings we have for rent on the property. So yeah, just another option for people to bring people together.
Now, this wedding on the Midway, it would take place at 2 p.m. on the Midway. Paint a picture for us. What would that look like?
Well, our vision is on the Midway in front of the big wheel, so the giant Ferris wheel, and right beside that is always the iconic wave swingers. So you'll see a lot of posters with the seats with the chains swinging around, and that it's just an iconic couple of rides. So we're going to have a little area set up right there. We have a florist to come in and decorate. So we'll have a almost, just chairs and an aisle set up, and we have an officiant there for you, a carriage ride with Clydesdales in our vintage wedding carriage. And yeah, we're just 20 of your closest friends and loved ones surrounded by thousands of strangers.
What a way to kick off a marriage, right? Besides getting the ceremony and everything that you mentioned there, the florist, the photographer, the horse ride, is there anything else that the winning couple will receive?
The carriage ride will continue. There's a parade right after at 3 p.m. So we'll parade you through the Midway. The couple and their 20 loved ones will receive ride wristbands or tickets. Maybe grandma doesn't want a wristband. She only wants to go on the lovely Ferris wheel. So we'll set everybody up with all the rides they want. And the winning couple gets a very popular exhibit or attraction at the X. They get a helicopter ride, a private helicopter ride for 2.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool and pretty romantic, by the way, too. So now, if people want to apply for this, what do they need to keep in mind? How do they do it?
Oh, they can actually just go right to the X event page on our website, redriverx.com. So navigate over to the X, and there's a Marriage on the Midway section, and there's just a couple questions. And we really actually just want to know your love story, and our little panel will just select the most romantic story.
What kind of couples are you hoping apply for this?
Well, I don't know. It's open to everybody because our little group here, we haven't done this before. So our criteria is just show us your romance. Yeah. And hopefully, we would love if it started at the X, but it doesn't have to. It just has to be romantic, and we'll make it, we'll seal it as a more romantic marriage to start off with.
Well, Tara, it sounds like it's so much fun, and I think you guys will get quite a few applications. So thank you for joining us this morning here on the show.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Take care. That is Tara Stolatoni from the Red River X Association. The contest is open now until March 31st. A winner will be contacted in April.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
7:45. It is still minus 14 degrees in Winnipeg at both the Forks and the airport. Ice crystals actually make that light snow now being reported at the airport. Wind out of the east-northeast at 15, looking to get up to a high of -4, under a chance of some light snow mixed in with freezing drizzle. More than 100,000 Canadians in the Middle East have registered with Global Affairs Canada. The federal government has been asking Canadians in the region to identify themselves to officials ever since the war broke out last weekend. Of those who've registered, just over 2,000 have asked for help to leave where they are. That's according to Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand. Last night, she gave an update to reporters in Ottawa. She says more than half of those asking for assistance leaving are in the UAE. Anand says she has personally made a request to the UAE to use its airspace to charter flights to evacuate Canadians. In Lebanon, around 164 Canadians have asked to help flee. That number is up to 200 in Qatar. As for Iran,
of the almost 3,000 Canadians in Iran who have registered, 74 have requested assistance in leaving. Unfortunately, we have no ability to arrange ground transportation in Iran, as we do not have diplomatic relations with Iran, and we have declared the IRGC as a terrorist entity under Canadian law. We have, however, stationed additional consular officials in neighboring countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Israel, Jordan, Turkey, and Turkmenistan, who can meet Canadians who cross the border and assist them with visa requirements and with arranging onward travel. Please only attempt to drive to the border when it is safe to do so. The situation throughout the region remains volatile and unpredictable. That is why we have a team here at GAC working 24/7 to provide updates to Canadians who have registered with our ROCA system. We strongly encourage Canadians abroad to continue registering with the ROCA system to receive up-to-date information rapidly.
You mentioned that Canada is working with other countries trying to coordinate. Can you give me a sense of how that works? Will other countries free up seats? Will we free up seats? And we hear that other nations are able to get their citizens out of Oman, but we are not able to do so. Why is that?
So right now, in answer to the first part of your question, my specific conversations with the foreign ministers of Australia and the United Kingdom are based on this reciprocal offer that we have to each other to assist citizens with travel arrangements if there is space on their flights or their other forms of transportation. And this, in fact, is reciprocal work that we put in place routinely with other like-minded countries and is quite commonplace. So, in other words, the way it works is if there is space on their planes and there are Canadians who want to leave the region, then they will offer that space up and we will do the same. So, for example, in the flight that we had block booked today, leaving from Beirut, we block booked 75 seats for Canadians. Not all of them were filled by Canadians because we didn't have the full complement who wanted to leave at the time, and so we were able to offer those seats up, and those countries are doing the exact same thing with us.
That was Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand speaking with reporters yesterday. She says Canadians in the Middle East should register with the Registration of Canadians or ROCA service if they haven't done so already. She did mention that. The government uses the free service to notify Canadians abroad about emergencies in their location or those at home. 10 minutes now to 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. If you're a member of Gen Z and you don't own a car, well, you're not alone. A new survey by Angus Reid found that car ownership among young people is declining, and with Gen Z twice as likely to forego car ownership than the average Canadian. The survey was commissioned by the car rental company Turo. It's just the latest in a growing amount of evidence showing younger people aren't as interested in car ownership. Greg Layson is digital editor for Automotive News Canada, and I spoke with him earlier.
Good morning.
Were you surprised at all by the findings of this survey?
No, not at all. You know, I've been covering this industry for a decade now, and what I've seen is the disappearance of the entry-level car. You know, vehicles that used to exist, such as the Chrysler K car, Chevy Cavalier, Ford Escort. I remember all these as a high school senior and as a college and university student as being first-time buyer cars. They just don't exist anymore. And now the monthly payments on average in Canada are $800 a month or more for an average car ownership bill. If you're early in your career, you're living at home, you're in college or university, you can't afford $800 on a part-time job and going to school or in your sort of entry-level job. And so what's happening now is everything in this industry comes down to money. And if you can't afford it, you're not going to buy it. I think that's the number one factor at play.
What else do you think is at play here, and why Gen Z people are just not choosing car ownership?
Well, I think, anecdotally, we've heard, 15, 16, 17-year-olds are sort of delaying getting their license, so maybe they're not in the market as early when they're young. The other thing is we are now facing the first generation that has been connected since birth, right? They have entered a world that has had cell phones since they were born, and so everything's done online and on their phones, and so ride-sharing, ride-hailing have become a factor that didn't used to exist even, 10, 15 years ago. And who are most likely to use that new technology? It's Gen Z. We know this. In fact, even when they're looking for their cars, they want tech-heavy cars, the fun stuff, automated parking, all the driver assist things that come with it, even, the lights that flicker to music that are in sync. All of these things, technology is driving Gen Z. And so when you factor that in, ride-sharing, ride-hailing, also a factor too.
We've been talking mostly, Greg, here about Gen Z car ownership, but overall, in general, what are the trends in driving? Are people giving up driving?
They're not giving up buying cars, that's for sure. We sold 1.9 million last year in Canada. Anywhere above 1.8 million is a success for the auto industry in Canada. So there are still sales. There are still people driving. And even Gen Z drives more hours, according to research, than any other cohort. So people are still getting around, moving around. Even the young folks, when they do own a car and get behind the wheel, they do tend to drive it. But how do you get them behind that wheel in the first place is the question.
So what do these trends mean then for car companies?
It means they have to become more affordable. It is an issue. So at our dealer forum in September, it was an issue. At our National Congress in February, it was an issue. It's a topic of conversation everywhere. They even had discussions about it on Capitol Hill in Washington, the affordability issue in the auto sector. So they need to start offering smaller entry-level vehicles. Now, if you look at Ford, they do that sort of with a pickup. They have the Maverick, and Ford is sort of going, okay, we want people to climb that ladder, but let's get them to climb that ladder in higher margin vehicles. So we start with a smaller subcompact pickup and move up from there. But what really needs to happen, Chrysler, for example, I had their CEO on my podcast. They are determined to bring back cars, something they haven't had since 2023. And when they did, it was a full-size sedan. Everyone is starting to realize it has to be an entry-level vehicle in your lineup in order to create brand loyalty. The other thing is to sell them to Gen Z, you need to be where they live, and that is online, on phones, on screens. And there's a dealership in Ontario that's hired 2 young influencers to do YouTube and TikTok videos reviewing cars as they arrive at the dealership, and they have seen enormous success in engagement and interest in sales in doing that. So you have to be where they are, and you have to offer them something they can afford.
Greg, this has been such an interesting interview. Thank you so much for joining us today here on the show.
Anytime.
That was journalist Greg Layson on declining car ownership among Gen Z. He's the editor of Automotive News Canada. At the beginning of our conversation, we mentioned a survey that was conducted by Angus Reid that showed Gen Z twice as likely to forego car ownership as the average Canadian. The web survey was conducted among a representative sample of 1,500 Canadians and has a margin of error of 2.5%, 19 times out of 20. It is going to warm up here in Winnipeg. We're currently at minus 14 here in the city. We've been kind of holding at that temperature for much of the morning. Light snow, as I can see outside right now here, our Studio 541 Portage Avenue, looking to get up to a high of minus 4 degrees. Chance of snow with the risk of some freezing drizzle in there. We're going to get more on the forecast coming up, but now at 7:56, let's check in with Heather Wells and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the city of Winnipeg is a step closer to reducing how fast you go on residential streets. Yesterday, the Public Works Committee voted in favor of asking the province for permission to cut speeds from 50 to 40 kilometers an hour. That would be the default speed. Committee Chair Councillor Janice Luke says ultimately it is up to the province to allow the city to make broad changes to the default speed on our streets. So we'll hear more about that as well. A security guard trainer in northern Manitoba wants the province to revisit its temporary licensing exemption. It allows adults to be employed as security guards for up to 6 months while they wait to be trained and pass the province's exam. But Peter De Beer says it can be a public safety risk. We'll hear why in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with a look at your CBC morning headlines. Well, coming up here after 8 o'clock, Premier Wab Kinew will join me live in studio for his monthly interview here on Information Radio. The spring sitting at the Manitoba Legislative Building started yesterday. We're going to talk to the Premier a little bit more about that as well. He met with Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly, who was in town earlier this week. So we're going to talk about that. Stay tuned for that. Right now, current temperatures around the province: light snow, drifting snow in Brandon at minus 16. Churchill ice crystals at minus 26. Thompson right now, some light snow and minus 20. Winnipeg still holding at that minus 14. Light snow heading up to minus 4 today with still the chance of more light snow mixed in with freezing drizzle. Traffic note, want to tell you about collision at Broadway and Balmoral. Eastbound curb lane partly blocked. Keep left to pass. Again, that is a collision at Broadway and Balmoral. Eastbound curb lane partly blocked. If you have another traffic tip, a commuter tip that you want to share with us here on the show, 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next here, World Report.
On cue.
I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. Toronto's Ashton James has been on a steady rise with roles in Law & Order Toronto and Netflix's The Madness. Now he leads the remake of the hockey classic Youngblood.
I worked my whole life for this.
He's here to talk about learning to skate for it and how his grandmother inspired him to become an actor.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current. with Matt Galloway.
Do you have a friend group? It turns out that Canadians are actually spending less and less time with our friends. Many of us don't have a friend group. What exactly is a friend group, and what does it mean in terms of how we should approach making new friends? We'll talk about that coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies.
Prime Minister Mark Carney is not ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacks Canada or its allies. It follows news that a missile launched from Iran was intercepted by NATO air defenses as it headed towards Turkish airspace. Carney says there's a clear distinction between the current U.S. mission and what happens if the conflict spirals.
We're not party to those actions, but we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister says it is not the time for a ceasefire. Speaking to the Australian Parliament in Canberra, Carney told MPs there the two Commonwealth countries must draw closer together. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, meanwhile, says the alliance is not currently considering its all-for-one collective defense pact, even after that missile was intercepted heading for Turkey yesterday. Speaking in Brussels this morning, Rutte said NATO remains vigilant, but it is not directly involved in the war between the U.S. and Iran.
Nobody's talking about Article 5, and the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant. We support the president in taking out that capability. But of course, there are always downsides in the sense that you have to be sure that you defend every inch of NATO territory as we are doing.
Rutte added that while NATO itself isn't a combatant, European allies are providing what he described as key enabling support to allow the United States to project its power into the Middle East. On the ground, meanwhile, the fighting remains a direct showdown between Israel, Iran, and the United States. The CBC's senior correspondent David Common has been tracking the escalation from Tel Aviv. David, we're seeing another heavy exchange of fire. What's the latest this morning?
No question that on day 6 of this war, the missiles and drones continue to be fired by essentially all sides here, Iran, Israel, and the United States. Here in Israel, in the overnight hours, we saw a large volley of missiles being intercepted. In fact, just above our position, we saw Israeli interceptors exploding in the air as they took out incoming fire from Iran. Meanwhile, in Iran, the United Nations Refugee Agency says at least 100,000 people have left the capital, Tehran, just in the first 2 days trying to get to safety. That number likely quite a bit higher now, given the ongoing bombing campaign by both Israel and the United States. We are also hearing that Iranian drones hit Azerbaijan. Not clear whether that country was the intended target or why it would be, but it means another country has been connected to this war. Now, more than a dozen nations involved in this Middle East conflict in some way.
David, beyond the strikes on Iran, Israel pushing further into Lebanon against Hezbollah. How's that front evolving?
This is the second front for Israel. The Americans not involved there, but no question the Israeli Air Force is pounding positions not just in southern Lebanon, but in Beirut as well. We are told 3 people have been killed, 6 others injured after 2 strikes near the capital. Israel has already done a limited ground incursion into South Lebanon, but there are signs with reservists being called up and a greater planning that something bigger might be coming in terms of a ground invasion. Lebanon says 58,000 people have fled their homes and are sheltering where they can find space. Israel has said it's hitting command centers belonging to Hezbollah. Lebanese state media also saying an Israeli drone strike hit an apartment in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon, and that killed a senior Hamas official.
CBC's David Common for us in Tel Aviv. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
States in the Persian Gulf remain on high alert as Iran lashes out at its regional neighbors. There are reports of fresh explosions and drone attacks today across Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. The chaos has prompted Qatar to suspend its gas exports, a move that threatens nearly 20% of the world's supply. Megan Williams is in Dubai with the latest.
Multiple explosions were heard in Doha, Qatar this morning just before noon. Authorities sent an emergency alert warning the security level threat was elevated and began evacuating neighborhoods around the U.S. Embassy in the capital as a precaution. The blasts follow a string of drone attacks on American diplomatic sites this week, including the U.S. embassies in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and the U.S. consulate here in Dubai. Explosions were also reported this morning in Manama, Bahrain, where operations at Khalifa bin Salma port, the country's main commercial gateway, were halted under what officials called a force majeure order. Here in the United Arab Emirates, several workers were injured in an industrial area of Abu Dhabi, hit by falling shrapnel from intercepted projectiles. French fighter jets are now patrolling skies to defend a military base near Abu Dhabi that was struck by drones earlier in the week. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it has struck an American oil tanker in the northern Gulf. The tanker reported an explosion and possible hull breach near Iraq's Khor al-Zubayr port, though the vessel remains afloat. The conflict is also hitting global energy markets. Qatar has declared force majeure, saying it cannot meet its contractual obligations on gas exports after attacks on its facility, raising fears of supply shortages in a country that provides roughly 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. Megan Williams, CBC News, Dubai.
The U.S. and several Gulf nations are turning to Ukraine for help in shooting down Iranian drones. After 4 years of drone attacks from Russia, Kyiv has developed cheap acoustic sensors and hunter drones that destroy Iranian Shaheds for a fraction of a cost of a missile. President Zelensky says exporting this expertise is now a priority, even as the wider Middle East war has forced him to put peace talks with Moscow on ice. The U.S. Congress could hand President Donald Trump a green light to continue military operations in Iran virtually without restriction. The House is set to vote today on a resolution that would require the president to seek congressional approval for ongoing strikes. It follows a failed vote in the Senate yesterday. The CBC's Willie Lowry has more from Washington. Willie, what's happening today?
Now it's the House's turn to vote on a resolution that, if passed, would immediately limit President Donald Trump's ability to continue carrying out strikes in the Middle East without Congress's approval. The vote, like the one in the Senate, is unlikely to garner enough bipartisan support, but it is a litmus test for where Congress stands on this nascent war, and a vote in many ways for history. Here's Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Every member of Congress needs to go on record. This is a matter of the utmost significance that the framers understood. They decided that in our system, they don't want a king-like figure being able to unilaterally decide to send American men and women to war.
House Majority Leader Mike Johnson says the vote is a terrible idea.
It would empower our enemies, it would kneecap our own forces, and it would take the ability of the U.S. military and the commander-in-chief away from completing this critical mission to keep everybody safe.
Johnson went on to say he didn't believe that the U.S. was at war, but conducting a specific military operation.
So, as you say, Willie, an operation, a mission. GOP lawmakers taking great pains to say that it's not a war. Unpack the importance of that.
It reveals the administration's seemingly mixed messaging about what exactly is taking place in the Middle East right now, with most administration officials describing it as a large-scale military operation rather than a war. The administration also appears to be offering different and sometimes contradictory reasons for why the attacks took place when they did. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the Israelis were about to strike and therefore the U.S. needed to join in. The president seemingly contradicted that reasoning when he said he was the one spearheading the strikes.
CBC's Willie Lowry in our Washington bureau. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure, John.
And finally, in other news, polls are now closed across Nepal in the first nationwide election since a violent youth-led uprising last September. Security's tight across the country as nearly 19 million people cast ballots to elect a new parliament. Many voters say they're looking for a clean break from entrenched corruption.
I really hope that whoever wins, they plays a significant role in development of Nepal, enhancing the life situations of every citizen, along with those who are marginalized.
A new party led by a rapper turned politician is considered the front runner. Results are expected over the weekend. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you are enjoying World Report, you might enjoy our podcast, and you can follow us and tell a friend. It helps to spread the word. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app and streaming live on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse, in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, it is currently minus 14 degrees in Winnipeg. We've been holding steady at that temperature here for much of the morning, looking to get up to a high of minus 4. Light snow right now. Looks like that light snow will continue throughout the day, and also a chance of some freezing drizzle there. We're going to get more on the forecast coming up here with Abby Adeyemi, but on this final segment of the show, Premier Wab Kinew is here in studio for his monthly interview here on Information Radio. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to ask him about a development that happened yesterday. The city of Winnipeg is one step closer to reducing speed limits in some areas of the city from 50 to 40. We're going to get the Premier to weigh in on that, as well as unpacking a lot of other things that are happening in the news right now. But before we get to that interview, let's head to Heather Wells and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, the province has launched public consultations to learn more about how you feel about artificial intelligence. It wants to know about the risks of AI, like identity theft, deep fakes, and the misuse of personal data. Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says those consultations are a good thing. She says it's something governments in all countries need to be acting on. And a 14-year-old hockey phenom playing for the under-15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings has made league history. Cale Nichol has smashed a point-per-game record set by Winnipeg's Jonathan Toews when he was just a teenager more than 20 years ago. Cale says it's great, but really doesn't affect him a lot. He says he is now focused on the playoffs. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. Let's say good morning to our crew here on the show. Darren Morash is producing our feed for CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. Abby Adeyemi keeping an eye on the forecast, and Sierra Sanders, of course, taking all your tips on our commuter line. Abby, you're here to talk about the forecast, and again, those extreme cold temperatures, actually more that wind chill continues up in the north.
Yes, don't let the lack of no alert for today fool you. We still have life-threatening cold, which remains a reality in the northern part of the province, where wind chills hovering near minus 55 mark this morning. So it's like a risk of frostbite in less than 6 minutes. You need to take it easy if you're out and about, from all the way tracking it from the Thompson Mark towards the Churchill region this morning. For Winnipeg right now, we're tracking temperatures around minus 14. We've been there all morning. Light snow in the air. We're heading for a high of minus 4 under these cloudy conditions. And for other regions in the south, we might be getting freezing rain also. So take it easy. The roads might be slippery during your commute in the Westman and Parkland region this morning. But for Winnipeg, we're looking at a precipitation-filled day with more like light snow and freezing drizzle in the forecast.
You make it sound so pleasant, Abby.
It's almost spring. Let's come on.
You got a thumbs up from the Premier too, so I think he's liking that forecast. Thank you so much, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's head now to Sierra Sanders and find out what's happening out there. We did have a couple of disruptions this morning. What's the very latest, Sierra?
Yeah, for sure. So the latest there is we're hearing about a collision at Broadway and Balmoral, and that is blocking the eastbound curb lane / snowbank because I think a vehicle kind of went over the curb there. So keep an eye out for that. Broadway and Balmoral, there's been a collision there, eastbound curb lane. Make sure to keep left to pass there as well. We are hearing about a situation at Goulet and St. Mary, specifically in the Dominion Center kind of strip mall area there. There is a heavy emergency response there due to a situation there. It's not affecting traffic so far, but figured I would let folks know if they do see a heavy emergency response there that they are attending to a situation there. The CBC News team is aware of it, and we are looking into it. So when we know what's going on there, we will make sure to let you know about that. So expect a little bit more presence of emergency vehicles there as they tend to a situation. We are aware of the situation, and we will get you the latest when we know. Still a little bit of time left in the show, so if there's something that has popped up on your commute, give me a call on the CBC commute line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Coming now up to 8:15 here on Information Radio. Premier Wab Kinew is back in studio for our monthly interview here on the show. Good morning to you, Mr. Premier.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I want to start off with something that developed yesterday. So the city of Winnipeg, one step closer to reducing speed limit in residential areas as well as some other parts of the city from 50 to 40. And just to remind our audience that even though they're one step closer, they need the province's help to do this because there needs to be changes to the Highway Traffic Act, and you're shaking your head no.
No, they can do it on their own.
Okay.
But the issue here is an interesting one because I think you'll probably have Winnipeggers and Manitobans on different sides of it. I can tell you my neighbor would probably welcome this change. He'd probably like it. And I could tell you that my brother-in-law probably wouldn't. He probably wouldn't like this change. So the thing with the city is they have the ability to make this change on their own. And if we as a province act, we would be changing it for every community in Manitoba. So not just the cities like Brandon and Dauphin, but small towns across the province as well too. So again, I respect the fact that there's a lot of different opinions on this, and we're going to keep working on making communities safer with the tools at the provincial level and working with municipalities on the tools that they have too.
I know you said that if the Highway Traffic Act was changed by the province itself, it would affect other communities outside of Winnipeg. Have there been other communities that have said something or reached out looking to lower their speed limits? I know a lot of people talking about safety in different communities.
I would say that there have been, but it's different from what the city is proposing, or at least some people at the city are proposing here. What we typically hear about are rural municipalities that are along highways where the speed limit is 100, 90, things like that. And they would say, like, as it goes through our small town, can we see that 60? 70, something like that. So it's a little bit of a different situation that we're hearing about from rural Manitoba.
Okay. I want to move on now because yesterday you announced the 72-hour detox center has started accepting people on meth. I know that it's still fairly new, but I want to ask you, how's it going? And do you really think that the average Winnipegger is going to see a difference out there on our streets?
Yeah, I think so. That's the main reason why we're doing it. Right now, the police do really important work. Our healthcare workers do really important work. And when somebody is in the grips of meth psychosis, it makes all of their jobs more difficult. It might mean a police officer having to stay with somebody for potentially an entire shift or longer. It could mean a healthcare worker in a waiting room, their safety in question or other complications. So having the ability to take somebody from a waiting room or from a street corner before they cause chaos or harm other people, I think is a really, really important step. We're also taking this from a healthcare perspective. So part of the reason why we passed the law to make this possible last year, but we're only opening the facility now, is because we've been listening to the physicians with the expertise in addictions and mental health, and basically making sure that the highest quality of medical and health supervision will be there at this facility, so that while we're trying to keep the community safe, we're also keeping this person who's struggling with addiction safe as well.
It's a very delicate balance, having to keep someone for 72 hours against their will. I mean, that is 3 days when you think about it. How are you going to make sure that this facility doesn't do harm in the community? And some people might say this might stigmatize drug use and addiction.
Well, the stigma's already there. I mean, if you're driving to work and you see somebody swinging their fists at nobody, like what is happening? You're creating a stigma for our province and for how we feel about our own personal safety. So I respect the fact that people want this protective care center to have high quality interventions that are going to look after the person with addictions. But I would just remind folks, we can't separate what's happening to that individual with what's happening to our broader community. And right now, going back to the past decade or however long meth has really been that really prominent public health issue, we haven't been doing a service to the broader community. And so this is about bringing that back into balance and saying, you know what, if somebody's out there screaming on a street corner, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just take them off the street until they calm down, so that the person waiting at the bus stop, or, you know, your grandparent who's just trying to walk to the grocery store, or your kid who's walking home from school is not going to have to worry about their personal safety. So all these things are complicated questions for sure, but we can't deal with it in a vacuum. We always have to be balancing respect for the individual's health and rights and freedoms while respecting the responsibility that we have to the safety and the rights and freedoms of everyone else in our society.
I want to move on now to something that is a talker, and that is BC. I know that you've talked about this earlier this week about
is this,
BC.
the time change?
We
Sure is a talker.
Yeah, we had a call-in yesterday on noon, and it was split. We had a lot of people that were saying yay or nay when it comes to the time change. I know that you've said that Manitoba is not looking at this, but would you reconsider? I mean, BC did go to residents and ask them, and it appeared that overwhelmingly people had said, let's just keep the clocks where they are.
Well, I mean, I think it's something that I respect. Listen, everybody has their complaints to make when the clocks spring forward. A little bit less when we gain the hour of sleep later in the year. I think people enjoy that a bit more. But I think it's more the disruption for parents, right? Like, especially if your kid, their sleeping pattern's going to be thrown off. That's a big deal. And hey, listen, we've got an early U9 hockey practice on Sunday morning, so our family's going to be right in there with the midst of everyone else. But it's just more a question from my perspective of, like, we have these really urgent issues in the healthcare system that we're trying to address. We're trying to do some great things in the budget to help you with the cost of groceries. And so I want our focus to be on issues like healthcare, like groceries. Again, I recognize that the daylight savings time question is people think about it. People talk about it. It's an important issue. But if we all of a sudden decide to do the consultation and the legislative change, it's going to pull our attention away from emergency rooms. It's going to pull our attention away from the cost of living. So not that it's not an important priority. It is. When we're talking about sleep and being able to raise your family well, that is a very important priority. But I just think we've been elected on a mandate to deliver on healthcare and affordability. And so we're just going to try and stay locked in on that for now.
I want to talk about affordability because you just touched it on right there. Budget day, March 24th, that's coming up. School budgets. Many school divisions here in Manitoba drafting or have finalized their budgets for the next school year. We saw that the Winnipeg School Division approved a 9.3% property tax increase. Brandon was looking at an increase of over 7%. Hanover approved a tax increase of 7% as well. Your government announced close to $80 million in new funding. But school divisions say that they're still feeling the financial crunch and now have to look to the taxpayer to help meet those shortfalls. What else can your government do to help these divisions to prevent them from passing it down year after year to the taxpayer?
Well, I think there's a few things I'd want to say. First of all, I respect the work that school divisions do and the trustees. And part of that goes back to Bill 64. So if your listeners would remember, fighting against Bill 64 was something that our team really leaned into alongside school divisions, alongside parents. And it was part of what led to Brian Pallister being chased out of office by turncoats in his own party. But Bill 64 was about centralizing power in the provincial government. And we said, you know what, that's not right. We want local control. So I do respect the important work that school divisions do. But now, since there's been this public outpouring saying we want local control over education, our role as a province is to say, listen, we're going to give you a 3.5% increase in funding, which is higher than inflation, right? And is dealing with a growing population in Manitoba as well. And at the individual school division level, they are making decisions about adding services, about staffing. They're making decisions about what they want to invest those resources in. So I think that part of this era that we're in right now is about saying, okay, we took a stand, we fought for local control, and now let's make sure that school divisions are being very transparent with the ratepayers and the parents and the students about, yeah, we are going to be asking you to contribute this, but in exchange, you're going to be getting these services that we've decided are important for the local area. The second thing that I would say is that if you look at Alberta right now, their provincial government has raised education property taxes, Danielle Smith, right? 21% province-wide, centrally. So again, when we look across the board at what's happening in other regions, hopefully we're going to be finding a way to help in our budget this year to make sure that there's enough funding for education. Because again, the alternative to what you're talking about here means less teachers, less EAs, less support for kids to have recreation and outdoor activities and stuff like that. Finding a balance between that and then the cost of living. I don't want to see people pay higher taxes. So I think we're going to have some help in the budget on the education property tax front, and we might be asking the top 1% to help us out with that.
Because 9% is obviously not cheap. I mean, but 7% is a big increase for families that
everything. Right
yeah,
now,
everything is big.
like
yeah,
groceries, rent, and so like any sort of increase
Yeah.
is a big deal for somebody who's struggling to get by. I
Now,
totally agree.
The previous PC government compelled school divisions to kind of limit that property
But
tax
that
increase.
results in a cut to education. What you're saying there, if you strip away the PC party lingo, is less funding for school divisions. That's what it means at the end of the day. I don't want to be the premier that's taking money away from kids to learn. So what we're trying to do instead of the PC cuts is we're trying to find a fair way to make sure that schools have enough support for our kids in the classroom. We know that there's more need than ever. Teachers are being asked to do more. I think we have a better understanding of mental health in children. And then as a result, that calls on us to invest more in our kids. So now's the time to invest in the future, but it's also the time for us to balance that with the affordability thing. So our budget is going to try and make sure that we got enough resources for schools, but also that we're helping you out with your property taxes.
I want to ask you about meeting Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly earlier this week. Can you say at all what was discussed between you and the minister? She did, mention Port of Churchill and the importance of it as a federal project. But what can you tell us about your meeting with Joly earlier this week?
Melanie Joly's great, and I think she's a great friend to Manitoba too. In addition to Churchill, which I hope folks recognize, not only is this a great project for our province, but it's a great project for our country. And so I think the federal government is really keying into that, and they're starting to lean in. In fact, I know that the federal government has decided to lean in to Churchill, so now we're working together on that. That's really exciting. But Minister Joly was also saying, as one of the economic ministers, they're really looking at defense spending, and defense spending is going to be one of the big ways that they promote our economy. I think her message effectively here in Manitoba was, Manitoba businesses, Manitoba workers, let's figure out a way for you to pivot towards defense, and then therefore you can bring more resources and more opportunity into Manitoba. So whether it's aerospace as one of the big opportunities that we have here or other sectors, I just think that she had a really encouraging message for Manitobans to let's work together to meet this moment that we're in for our country.
Because it's still, the federal government still hasn't been listed as one of the major projects in the national.
Is that what you said on the radio?
Well, I mean,
what did you say?
Well, she said that it's an important project for sure. But it hasn't been named as one of.
But none have.
Okay.
No projects across Canada have been technically designated a project of national importance yet, right?
So how much more then is it going to take for the federal government to invest in the expansion of the Port of Churchill?
Yeah, we've got 3 or 4 studies on the go with them right now. Each one of those is going to build the case. But I think there's something that we're working on with the federal government behind the scenes that hopefully we'll be able to announce later this year that I think will really make the Churchill opportunity lock into focus for everybody. Because really, when we get our Western Canadian goods to market, whether it's agriculture, mining, manufactured goods, or energy products, Western Canada has so much of Canada's economy. And if we can get that to Europe, to India, to other parts around the world, it just gives us that opportunity to Trump-proof our economy and create more opportunity for everybody here.
Finally, I want to ask you here.
We're covering everything
Yes,
today.
we are.
All right.
We're going to try and get through everything. The Prime Minister continues his visits overseas, China, India. I understand that all the premiers were invited to go to these other countries. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe has been to China and India. Manitoba, it sounds like you were invited. Why not take up the Prime Minister on those opportunities to create ties with those countries and maybe perhaps create some business here and some ties with some local businesses?
Well, I support the Prime Minister in doing these trade deals. And if there is a free trade agreement that gets signed in India later this year, like they're talking about, we'll go. The challenge with this trip is that the invite came about a week before they wanted us to get on a plane to India. And even then, the details were pretty hazy. So getting on a plane to go to the other side of the world for a photo op, not sure that's the best use of our time right now, because we got affordability, public safety, healthcare, all these issues here at home. But if we get to a point where we could go overseas and bring back something tangible, like a free trade deal that says Manitoba business, Manitoba workers, you've got opportunity, then we'll definitely get on a plane and make that happen.
We covered everything today, Mr. Premier, so I really do
Wow,
appreciate
thanks so much for the time.
joining us on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That is Premier Wab Kinew here for his monthly interview. Stay with us. Your CBC local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -13. We'll be feeling normal, though, by afternoon. A seasonal high today of -4. Prime Minister Mark Carney isn't ruling out Canadian involvement in the Middle East if Iran attacks Canada or its allies. The Prime Minister addressed the Australian Parliament today, outlining his foreign policy vision. In a news conference afterwards, Carney was asked if Canada might join the U.S. and Israeli-led war against Iran.
So one can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
The Prime Minister says it is not the time yet for a ceasefire. Now, the U.S. and several Gulf nations are turning to Ukraine for help shooting down Iranian drones. After 4 years of drone attacks from Russia, Kyiv has developed cheap acoustic sensors and hunter drones that destroy Iranian Shaheds for a fraction of the cost of a missile. President Zelensky says exporting this expertise is now a priority, even as the wider Middle East war has forced him to put peace talks with Moscow on ice. Here at home, Winnipeg drivers are closer to having to ease up on the gas. Yesterday, the Public Works Committee voted to ask the province to change the Highway Traffic Act, allowing the city to reduce the default speed to 40 kilometres an hour from the current 50. Councillor Janice Lukes, Public Works Chair, says she gets calls every week from people saying vehicles are going too fast. Lukes says if the city gets the provincial go-ahead, Council will vote to reduce the residential speed to 40 kilometres an hour.
It takes 18 seconds more to go 40 versus 50. This is only in residential neighborhoods, not the collectors, not the primary, not the priority ones, just the residentials.
Luke says some have suggested reducing the speed to 30 kilometers an hour, but she doesn't think there's enough support. And she doesn't know how long it would take for the province to make a decision. The Manitoba government wants to know what you think about artificial intelligence. It launched public consultations to learn more about the technology's risks, while it considers introducing some limits, including age restrictions. Monique St. Germain at the Canadian Centre for Child Protection says the consultations could help identify guardrails to prevent AI-generated child sexual abuse material.
There is already a lot of child sexual abuse material that is on the internet that we have been attempting to deal with it for quite a while, and this is just adding to an already very huge problem.
The province-wide consultations will focus on data privacy laws and creating clear rules around how to use AI responsibly. A security guard trainer in northern Manitoba wants the province to revisit its temporary licensing exemption. It allows adults to be employed as guards for up to 6 months while they wait to be trained and pass the province's exam. The government says this kind of license is only valid once and is only given in exceptional cases. But Peter De Beer says it can be a public safety risk if given to someone who has no law enforcement or de-escalation expertise.
The person does not know. Where do you get your legal right from? How are you supposed to do things? Are you allowed to use force or you're not allowed to use force? And if you are allowed to use force, when does it come that you use force? They have no knowledge or none whatsoever. So this could cause a huge problem.
The province just granted more than 150 temporary licenses to be security guards during the last fiscal year. A 14-year-old hockey phenom playing for the under-15 AAA Brandon Wheat Kings is turning heads in the hockey world. Cale Nickel finished with the highest points per game in Winnipeg's AAA league. In fact, he broke Winnipeg Jet Jonathan Toews' record set more than 20 years ago. Nickel's parents, Kurt and Carrie, say even though their son is already catching the attention of the Western Hockey League, he's focusing on his team's play.
He's pretty down to earth, and he's got a good head on his shoulders.
And we're a humble family. It's just, the team and coaches and parents have just supported us, and try to not draw attention away from team because it's a team game and Cale's a team kid.
Nickel has been touted as a potential early pick in next year's WHL Bantam draft. This weekend, though, he and his team are competing for the provincial title in Brandon against the Winnipeg Bruins. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That is Heather Wells with your CBC local news, 8:35, and you're listening here to Information Radio. Let's turn it over now to Sierra Sanders, who has been keeping an eye on your morning commute. Hey, Sierra.
Hi, Marjorie. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a busier morning today. Thank you to everyone who has called. We are hearing about a situation at the Dominion Center at Goulet and St. Mary's. From the sounds of it, it sounds like a vehicle had struck one of the businesses in that strip mall there. So you want to be aware of that. There might be heavy emergency vehicle presence in that area. It wasn't affecting traffic, but just to be aware of that situation there. As well, still hearing about Broadway and Balmoral, a collision in the eastbound curb lane. Make sure to keep left to pass there. So that's Broadway and Balmoral. There's been a collision. Eastbound curb lane there sounds to be affected. As well, just a quick note, eastbound and westbound Sargent Avenue, all eastbound and westbound lanes will be closed for a special event until March 6th. So the north and south sidewalks will remain accessible, but will be intermittently closed with stop and go control. But all lanes will be open during the morning and afternoon rush hours.
Thank you very much, Sierra. Let's check it now with Abby Adiemi and a last look at your forecast. Hey, Abby.
In summary, precipitation field day for the south, and it's still dangerously cold in the northern part of the province. Look out for those freezing drizzle later.
Thank you very much, Abby. And thank you to you all for tuning in today. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much to our crew here on the show, Abby Adiemi, Sierra Sanders, Darren Morash. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.